The Queen is dead! I heard the words pass from man to man, running like lightning through the crowd of servants now thronging the courtyard. My heart gave a strange, sickening lurch, and I thought I might fall. I opened the casement to call down to Robert, to ask if it were true, but then I saw that he was leaving already. They were leading out another horse for him, a showy white stallion that disliked the morning chill as much as I did, and was sidestepping and trying to rear. Robert brought him under control with a ruthless hand, turning once more for the bridge over the moat. He paused, looked up, and caught my eye. He said nothing, made no gesture, hesitated for less than a breath. I knew where he was going. Robert was ever the showman, even at a time like this, on his white charger as he rode to the Princess Elizabeth's side. This was his moment, his time at last. Now, his ambition would be unleashed. I closed the casement silently and sat down. Let it begin. Chapter 19. Lizzie, present day. The house looked even worse in the daylight, like a nightmare version of Dickens crossed with an explosion in an upmarket hotel. Every surface was thick with dust. Ivy and Virginia creeper clawed at the windows, cutting out what natural daylight there was. Cobwebs hung as thick as curtains from the chandeliers. Lizzie groaned and stuffed her head under the pillow. Then she realised that the reason she had woken in the first place was because she could hear someone knocking at the door. Jules had gone home the previous night when Lizzie had insisted she didn't need anyone to babysit her. She was desperate to have her own space, which was odd when she had been isolated for so long, but it was how she felt. Jules had grumbled that she needed someone to keep an eye on her, but to Lizzie, this felt like a watershed. She'd come back to the High to make a fresh start, and she was doing that on her own. She'd had a hot shower, drunk some tea, and eaten some toast that Jules had whisked up, and had fallen into a deep and dreamless sleep, much to her own surprise. She struggled out from underneath what appeared to be an ancient eiderdown. She vaguely remembered Jules putting her to bed in her grandmother's room and assuring her that the sheets at least were clean. She wasn't complaining. She would have slept on a clothesline if needs be. The air was cold and smelled stale. Reaching for the huge fur-lined coat she had found in the wardrobe the night before, she dragged it on over her pyjamas and stumbled downstairs. The knocking sounded again. Lizzie felt disoriented. There couldn't be anyone at the door, because they couldn't get past the huge gates, and even if they had, she shouldn't open up, because it was probably some paps who had discovered where she was. She didn't want a photograph taken with her hair as tangled as the cobwebs, and her makeup all over her face. "Lizzie Kingdom in meltdown" would be the inevitable headline. The knocking was coming from the kitchen. She peered around the open door and saw a face staring back at her through the window. It was an old lady, a very old lady, with curly white hair and sharp, bright eyes, her head tilted like an inquisitive blackbird. When she saw Lizzie, she smiled and knocked even more vigorously. Lizzie felt a huge rush of warmth and affection. She struggled across the kitchen, stubbing her toe on the table leg and repressing a curse. The woman at the window was gesturing and pointing, by which Lizzie, who couldn't hear her through the triple glazing, assumed she meant she would go to the back door. This led to another confusing 5 minutes, whilst she tried to find which door led out to the porch and where the keys might be. "Aunt Avery," she said as the door finally creaked open, freeing a spider to bolt for freedom. "It's so wonderful to see you again." The aunt was an honorific title. Avery Basing had been her grandmother's oldest and closest friend, and godmother to Lizzie's own mother, Annie.
Elizabeth!
The old lady enveloped her in a hug. She was warm and smelled of a very expensive perfume. Her marketing basket bumped Lizzie's hip, making her wince.
It's lovely to see you too. You've grown.
She let Lizzie go and swept past her, small but stately, into the kitchen, where she put the basket down on the worktop.
My, you've some cleaning up to do here. It's a good job you've come home at last.
Lizzie laughed. Neither the house nor I are fit to be seen.
Juliet rang me just now to ask me to look in on you,
Avery said.
I didn't want to intrude earlier, but really, Elizabeth.
She glanced at the clock.
It's about time you were getting dressed, isn't it?
Lizzie laughed. She had always liked Avery's no-nonsense style. Absolutely, she said. Excuse me and I'll go and do that at once. She was away up the stairs and into the shower before Avery could say another word. By the time she came back down, feeling clean and warm in a variety of outlandish outfits from the wardrobe, including 2 pairs of her grandfather's knitted wool socks, a polo neck jumper, and an old tweed jacket, Avery had put the kettle on, and there was a delicious smell of warm croissants filling the kitchen. It was a start, Lizzie thought, although the house was still chilly and smelled of damp. The ancient wiring was buzzing threateningly. Lizzie wondered if it would blow all the fuses in the house. Bill, it seemed, had done a cosmetic refurbishment of the place to make it look nice to let, but had cut corners on costs, which was exactly what she would have expected of him.
Juliet's told me what's been going on.
Avery was ensconced at the big farmhouse table.
I hear the police are barking up the wrong tree, and the press are behaving as badly as they usually do.
She shook her head.
Really, Elizabeth, this celebrity business isn't good for you, you know. You need a break from it all.
Well, Lizzie started to say, but Avery was still talking.
We're all so pleased to have you home.
She beamed at Lizzie, her bright blue eyes the most vivid thing in a face deeply lined with age.
You can help with the choir and join the new bowls club, and at last I can get somebody to cut down those dreadful Leylandii trees that are knocking my wall over. That awful caretaker you employ. What's his name? Ben? Barry? Bob? Well, I'm sorry to tell tales, dear, but he's never here, and when he is, he's so rude. I've asked him time and time again to get the Virginia creeper cut back because it threatens all the brickwork, and he told me that if I organised anything myself that affected your house or garden, he would sue me. I'm afraid he's a bad lot, dear.
Lizzie realised Avery was referring to Bill. Yes, she said. I'm afraid he is. I'm very sorry I didn't realise. I've been a bit too wrapped up in things.
Not to worry.
Avery was bracing.
You'll have it sorted in no time, I'm sure.
I'll add it to the list of things to do, Lizzie promised, along with calling in the tree surgeons and a gardener and a cleaning company. Avery looked horrified.
My dear, you cannot employ a cleaning company. They will take pictures and sell them to the newspapers, and then everyone will know where you are. Surely you know that. We thought—
She shot Lizzie a sharp look.
—that you came here for some privacy.
Well, yes, Lizzie said, but I can't tackle the whole house myself. It's too much of a mess. I really have let Bill get away with so much because I couldn't be bothered. She pulled a face. I'm sorry I've neglected the high so badly. I feel as though I've let the family down in some way. Avery patted her hand.
You're a busy girl. We all understand. And I know it's never been a favourite place of yours.
No, Lizzie admitted. After my mother died, I came to hate the place. But I think that was much more to do with Dad than anything else. Now, it feels much more like home again.
Oh, well, your father.
Avery's shrug encompassed everything there was to say about Harry Kingdom.
Such a vulgar man. I'm sorry to say it, Elizabeth, but it's true. When he changed the name of the High to the High Kingdom, I thought that summed him up.
She cocked her head.
Is he still alive? I don't recall seeing an obituary.
Just about, Lizzie said. We haven't spoken for years. He's with his 5th wife now, and runs a nightclub in California.
Each to their own, I suppose,
Avery said, with a sniff that indicated just how much she disapproved of Harry Kingdom. Lizzie smothered a smile. I promise I won't let the place go again, she said. And I need a piano tuner for the baby grand, she added. I'd like to write some songs.
I know someone,
Avery said.
He tends to my Bechstein. He's very discreet. I don't believe he even owns a mobile phone, so there's no likelihood that he would think of posting pictures of your house online.
That would be wonderful, thank you, Lizzie said.
The croissants will be ready in a minute,
Avery said.
Would you be a dear and make the tea? I'll go and fix the heating. I'm a hardy creature, Elizabeth, but it is Arctic in here.
She looked Lizzie up and down.
No wonder you're wearing such practical attire.
Jules and I did try to get the heating going. Lizzie immediately felt defensive. We tried to turn it on last night when we arrived, but we couldn't get it working.
I'll have it on in a jiffy.
Avery was already heading towards the door of the utility room.
I have the same system. I'll just press random buttons until something happens.
Lizzie found a teapot, warmed it, and added 3 bags. She imagined Avery wouldn't approve of weak tea. The croissants were crispy, and she found the butter and milk Jules had stocked up with. Heavenly, she said, as the heating hummed into life, and Avery re-entered the kitchen, dusting her palms. Thank you so much.
They aren't homemade croissants,
Avery said.
I am terrible at cooking, and I hate baking with a passion, but we do have a couple of excellent delicatessens in town that stock wonderful bread.
She was rummaging in the cupboard.
Here we are, your grandmother's last batch of whiskey marmalade. It will have matured nicely with all that alcohol in it. Ah, how we used to enjoy our nightcap of single malt together.
I don't remember her very well, Lizzie said regretfully. I only have impressions of her, really. That she was very tall, that she had hair almost the same colour as mine, and that she smelled of one of those famous 1990s perfumes. Was it Coty? I remember the bottles. They were so elegant. I wanted to be like her when I grew up.
Vanilla Fields.
Avery smiled.
Yes, she was a very elegant woman. You have a great look of her. I often think...
She stopped. What is it? Lizzie had a mouthful of delicious croissant. Not very elegant at all. Her grandmother would not have been proud of her. Avery shook her head.
Oh, just what a terrible tragedy it all was, she said.
The light had gone out of her eyes.
Like some sort of appalling play, with everyone dying in a uniquely horrible way. First your grandparents, and then your mother. She should never have married Harry Kingdom. She shook her head. I'm sorry if I offend you, dear, but he was never going to be a faithful husband. To have multiple wives or partners, plus all those other women, it has to be a sign of a very unsteady temperament. He used to claim it was the triumph of hope over experience, Lizzie said. But basically that was just an excuse for his womanizing. He's not a very nice person. She picked up another croissant. This one had chocolate sprinkles on the top. For a while, I was afraid you might follow in your mother's footsteps and fall for that squalid fellow the papers are so fascinated with, Avery declared. She poured another cup of tea for both of them. Oh, don't misunderstand me. He is terribly good-looking, and I can quite see why women adore him. After all, poor Amelia Robsart was dotty about him for a while, but they had a name for his sort in my mother's day, you know, dear. He would have been spoken of as a cad. You're talking about Dudley,
Lizzie said, her lips twitching.
Well, of course. Dudley Lester.
Avery shook her head in disgust.
He's a dreadful Lothario. I know you've been friends forever, dear, but don't step over that line. Not that we think you have, she added. We all know it's complete nonsense. We weren't surprised to hear about Lettice Knowles.
She fixed Lizzie with her very clear blue gaze.
You need to find yourself a nice beau, my dear. Would you like another croissant?
I couldn't squeeze any more in, thank you, Lizzie said. She was simultaneously distracted by Avery's use of the word beau and the fact that she was as on top of all the gossip as any celebrity reporter. I didn't realize you knew Amelia, she said. How was that?
I know everyone, dear,
Avery said benignly.
Amelia's mother, Jessica Scott, was a client of mine in London in the 1980s. I was a fashion designer, she added, seeing Lizzie's look of bemusement. I'm very disappointed you haven't heard of me. I designed the dress Jessica wore for the premiere of Chariots of Fire. It was known as the naked dress ever after, and quite stole the show.
I'm so sorry, Lizzie said. I'd have liked to see that.
I'll show you the photographs,
Avery said with a smile.
Celebrity is very fleeting, Elizabeth dear. None of us are immortal, as you'll discover.
Lizzie laughed. I think I've already learned that, she said. Do you know Amelia's brothers and sisters as well?
Not the younger ones,
Avery said.
Not the poor boy that's disappeared.
Her expression lightened a little.
I know Arthur. I knew his fiancée Mia, too.
I thought she was called Jenna, Lizzie said.
Jenna, Avery said vaguely. Of course. Yes, she was a sweet girl, but so frail. In spirit, I mean. For a while, they were all so close. Arthur and Jenna and Dudley and Amelia, before it all turned sour. Amelia bought Oakhanger Hall from me, you know. It had been in my family for centuries. And then she did all those appalling alterations, she added thoughtfully, as though it didn't look like a dog's breakfast already.
I hadn't realised, Lizzie said slowly. That Oakhanger had belonged to your family, I mean. I've only been there the once, when Dudley and Amelia got married.
Don't go back, Avery said, and suddenly her voice was devoid of all warmth. It's not a good place, Elizabeth. There's something wrong with it. My ancestor built it from the stones of Cumnor Place. She spread her hands expressively. What can you expect if you build the memory of a tragedy into the very fabric of a new building? Nothing happy will come of it, that's for sure. And so it proved, with Amelia falling down the stairs. She shuddered. Just like poor Amy Robsart. Lizzie felt the light brush of something along her spine, like feathers or cobwebs. She shivered convulsively. Who? She said. Amy Robsart, Avery repeated. She was the wife of Robert Dudley, later Earl of Leicester. He was the favourite of Queen Elizabeth I. Such a demeaning word, favourite, she added. It makes him sound like a gigolo. Still, she shrugged, women have been demeaned as royal mistresses for centuries, and I don't suppose we should feel sorry for Robert. He did very well for himself.
You said Amy was called Robsart, Lizzie said. Was Amelia descended from her?
Amy had no children, Avery said. But yes, it's the same family as Arthur and Amelia. They originated in Norfolk in the 15th century, I think, but Amy lived and died at Cumnor in Oxfordshire, which is only a few miles from here. So is Oakhanger Hall, of course. I did wonder... She looked troubled for a moment. When I heard about Amelia's death, I wondered if the curse of Oakhanger had struck again.
she said slowly.
It sounds fanciful, but it has happened a number of times before, and the circumstances were so similar, I could not help but think on it. My son tells me I'm a silly old woman, but he is a quantity surveyor and has very little imagination.
I don't think it's silly, Lizzie said slowly. She was thinking of her own gift of psychometry. There are plenty of things that are impossible to explain rationally, she said, but that doesn't mean we should assume they are fantasy. Avery's bright blue eyes considered her.
That's very sensible, Elizabeth, she said after a moment. It would be arrogance to think we can explain everything away logically. She sighed. When I first set foot in Oakhanger Hall, I knew there was something wrong about it, something awry. It was the fault of the 3rd Earl Basing. When Cumnor Hall fell into disrepair in the early 19th century, he took the stone to build his new manor at Oakhanger and to repair the church there. Not that he was particularly mean with money, she added with a twinkle in her eye. The Basings were extravagant to a fault, but it was a common practice in the past to reuse the materials from old buildings. All those monasteries that Henry VIII destroyed. There are pieces of them in buildings all over the country, and bits of Roman villas, too. We're a magpie breed. We take what we want, but sometimes, perhaps, we take more than we imagine.
You mean that the stone retains a memory of the past in some way? Lizzie said hesitantly. That certain buildings can contain the memory of events that had happened hundreds of years ago? Avery's gaze was very direct and very clear.
I think that's true,
she said quietly.
A physical place can hold an emotional memory.
Lizzie wondered why she hadn't thought of it before. It was such a close match with psychometry. Reading objects that had emotional memories attached was akin to reading the history of a place through its fabric. Perhaps she could do that too. She hadn't made a habit of going around touching the walls of old buildings. A flash of memory came to her, and she saw herself standing on the Thames embankment, touching the blue plaque that marked the site of Baynard's Castle. The vision she had seen then had not been an emotional memory, though. With the heat of the sun and the scent of the river, it had felt as though she was actually there. She blinked, coming back to the sunlit kitchen and the bright chirruping of the birds outside. Avery was watching her, and it felt as though she saw so much, knew so much, of what Lizzie was only starting to work out.
Be careful, Elizabeth dear, she said. I know you are curious, but there has been enough hurt.
She reached for her basket and unpacked more milk, butter, eggs, cheese, ham, lemonade, a loaf of granary bread, a sausage roll, and 3 other brown paper bags. Her busy movements and averted gaze indicated that the subject had been very firmly changed.
These are just a few things to keep you going, she said. Your grandmother would have wanted me to look after you, I'm sure.
She passed Lizzie a copy of a magazine.
This is the local paper. It's got a list of all the events and societies in Burford at the back, so you can join in. This is a community, she added. You're one of us now.
Thank you, Lizzie said, overwhelmed. She turned to the back of the magazine. A bewildering array of activities met her eye. Badminton, crafting, horticulture, knitting, the soup and pudding club. There was yoga, but probably not the type of class she was accustomed to doing at the World's End studio in Camden, which was generally accepted to be London's premier urban yoga experience. Perhaps I could try something new, she said weakly. The Art Society? I'm very poor at drawing.
What an excellent idea,
Avery smiled warmly.
Everyone wants to be a celebrity these days, so it's refreshing to meet a celebrity who wants to learn a new skill.
I expect there's a reality TV show already showing celebrities doing that, Lizzie said. And if there isn't, there soon will be. Avery kissed her cheek, gathered up the empty basket, and gave her a little wave.
I'll see you soon, my dear. Just call around if you need me.
The air seemed to buzz and quiver before settling after her departure. In the sudden silence, Lizzie's phone rang. When she saw that it was Bill, her heart sank.
Lizzie, where the hell are you?
Bill sounded exactly the same, as though they had never had an almighty row, as though she hadn't ever been arrested, as though she hadn't dismissed the lawyers he'd sent.
You disappeared from London before I could get hold of you.
Hello, Bill, Lizzie said. I'm so glad you called. I wanted to ask you.
Look, Lizzie, I've had the James Gordon show on,
Bill interrupted.
They want you for an interview tonight. It's a special feature on public shaming from Golden Girl to Enemy of the People sort of thing. There'll be you, and that politician who faked his expenses and was sent to jail, and a kid who was a chess champion until they worked out he'd been cheating.
Bill. It was Lizzie's turn to interrupt. No, just no.
I know it's short notice, Bill continued, and that you won't be able to talk about the legal case since it's ongoing, but you can drop a few hints. I'll get the lawyers to brief you. I'll send a car if you tell me where you are, and the producers of Famous and Frozen have been in touch. You know, it's the show where celebrities are abandoned in the Arctic for weeks with just a tent and a few tins of food. They thought the public might like to see you tackling something like that as a kind of punishment.
Again, Lizzie said. No, thank you. But as you're on the line, can I ask why you let the High get so run down when I was paying for a caretaker and a gardener?
Where?
Bill said.
Look, where are you?
At the High, Lizzie said, hence the question.
Right,
Bill said.
Right.
He sounded slightly more cautious now, as though the penny had finally dropped.
You're in Burford, of course. That's where you said you'd go. I didn't really think you'd do it.
Clearly not, Lizzie said warmly. Whilst Jules helps me sort out this legal mess, I'm going to be writing some music, just like I mentioned. Or I will be when I get the house cleaned, and the garden cleared, and the piano tuned, and all the other stuff done that I was paying you to sort out.
Look, Lizzie,
Bill said.
There was no point throwing money away on that place. I invested it for you instead. I'll give Francis a call. Ask him to send you the financial details.
Bill, Lizzie thought, had never been so keen to involve her in discussions with her accountants before. Please do call Francis, she said. Tell him I'm moving my business to Carpenter's. Oh, and Bill, you're fired. She pressed the button to end the call. It felt good. She felt free. Humming a few lines of music under her breath, she went into the library. The heating had not yet started to make an impression on the room. It felt cold and unwelcoming, and the shelves were thick with dust. In her grandparents' time, the books had all been catalogued and sorted by topic, like in a proper library system. Her grandfather had been a keen antiquarian collector, with a particular interest in local history. Lizzie's father had let all of that go. In fact, she thought he had probably only kept such an esoteric collection of books to give the impression that he was cultured. Plenty of the stacks had drink stains and cigarette burns on them. She found what was left of the history section. Roman Britain mingled on the shelves with the history of the Habsburg Empire and Fatimid Egypt. She searched in vain for something on the Tudor period, resolving to go down to the Burford Library as soon as she could to find a book about Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley. Then she saw a slim volume with a worn red leather cover and rough-cut pages. On the spine, in gold lettering, it read, An historical account of Cumnor, with some particulars of the death of the Countess of Leicester by Hugh Usher Tay. The date at the bottom was 1821. Lizzie wrapped her grandfather's big, thick jumper more closely around her and settled down in the leather armchair to read. Hugh Tay, she quickly discovered, had been a huge fan of Sir Walter Scott. Scott had based his book Kenilworth on the story of Amy Robsart, and this had heavily influenced Tay, who saw Amy as a tragic and ill-treated heroine, the victim of a ruthless and ambitious man. For all Lizzie knew, this could well have been the case, but she thought Amy sounded rather feeble. Whilst Robert Dudley was living it up at the court of Queen Elizabeth I, Amy pined away, neglected and alone in the Oxfordshire countryside. Eventually Robert, keen to be rid of his inconvenient wife in order to marry the Queen, had allegedly arranged Amy's murder. The corpse of their wretched victim was precipitated down a flight of stone stairs, which led from the long gallery to the hall below, under the hope that it might give a plausibility to a tale by which they intended to conceal their crime. Lizzie read, in Tay's lurid prose. From this time, the vengeance of heaven appears to have fallen, not only on the perpetrators of this atrocious murder, but also on the house in which it was committed. Lizzie shivered violently. This was close to the story that Avery had told of an emotional memory being held captive in the very fabric of Cumnor Hall, and subsequently transferred to Oakhanger, where the curse had repeated itself with Amelia falling down the stairs and breaking her neck in precisely the same way that Amy had. Except that Amy's death had apparently been murder. She wondered if that was true. She wondered if Johnny knew the story, and if so, what he had thought of it. Parallels, echoes of history, memories captured in stone. She could hear Johnny's voice. "This was once the site of a royal palace, you know. It was called Baynard's Castle. The foundations are right under this building." Down by the river, he had caught her hand and pulled her over to the wall to show her the plaque. When she had touched it, Johnny had been right beside her. She had seen his shadow in the vision, cutting across the sun. She thought about the CCTV footage and the explosion of white light. Perhaps that had been a manifestation of the psychometry that couldn't be caught by the naked eye, in the way that spirit orbs were apparently captured on camera. She knew very little about that sort of thing, but it might explain the lack of any physical evidence at the scene. Nothing, though, could explain why Johnny had been there one moment, caught in the frame, and the next, he had gone. Unless... She could see him sitting in the kitchen that night, the chocolate cup in front of him, spoon in hand, and he had asked her if she had the gift of time travel as well as the gift of psychometry. And she had laughed it off, because of course time travel was a fantasy, wasn't it? Johnny, the Fey one, the one with the telepathic gift. He had seemed so much more at ease with the psychic stuff than she was. He knew she possessed the gift of psychometry. He'd seen her read The Stone Angel when he had been only 6 years old. He'd seen her read Arthur's mind that day at the flat. He knew she could read objects and people, and he had suggested that her gift was a great one, and that she shouldn't be afraid of it. Perhaps he had already suspected that she could connect to the memories captured in buildings as well as in objects. Perhaps he had wanted to test that theory by taking her down to the remains of Baynard's Castle and seeing if she could call a memory from the stone. It would explain why he had asked her to go with him that night. The book clattered to the floor as Lizzie jumped to her feet. She didn't notice. She walked over to the window, touching the cold, cobwebbed panes, trying to clear her mind. Johnny understood her psychic powers so much better than she knew them herself. There could be a number of explanations for that, but given that he had admitted to being telepathic himself, one reason might be that he was a great deal more gifted than she was. She had assumed that his talent for telepathy worked only with Amelia. It certainly hadn't existed with her, and Arthur had referred to it as Johnny and Amelia's party trick. She hadn't imagined that Johnny might have other paranormal abilities, as he hadn't mentioned them to her at all. But perhaps that had been deliberate. Perhaps he had not wanted her to know. He had told her enough so that she had thought they were kindred spirits, but not so much that he would scare her. She saw again the picture from the embankment. Johnny had been beside her. She had touched the stone and inadvertently called up the vision of the old palace. And then Johnny was gone. She could hear Arthur telling her that his brother had a habit of disappearing, and behind that was the memory of something that Dudley had said. Something about Johnny vanishing practically in front of his eyes. She'd assumed it was a figure of speech, but perhaps it was not. Lizzie pressed her forehead to the glass and closed her eyes. She remembered Johnny talking about Amelia's death, the desperation in his voice, and the pain.
Millie's death hurts like hell on earth. I'd do anything to bring her back. Anything I could.
When she'd picked up Johnny's green notebook, she had felt the echo of those same emotions from him. She closed her eyes, trying to conjure once more the sense she had when she had held the notebook in her hand. She needed to speak to Arthur, needed the notebook back. All the clues would be in there, she was sure. And if she held it again, she would know. She bent to pick up the book about Amy Robsart. She thought about Avery telling her that there was a curse on the Robsart family that had repeated down the years for centuries, a curse that had now claimed Amelia. If Johnny wanted to break that curse, would he stop at nothing to do it? Would he go back in time to try to save Amelia? Or would he need to go back further still, to a palace that had been built hundreds of years before, to find Amy Robsart and save her, in order to stop the whole pattern from repeating down through time? Lizzie turned the idea over in her mind very carefully, half afraid that she was losing her own sanity. No one could ever believe such an irrational theory. She acknowledged it. If psychometry sounded fanciful, time travel was surely impossible, utter madness. Yet Johnny had vanished without trace. Johnny, who was psychic, who had a habit of disappearing at will, who wanted to save his sister's life. Lizzie knew she was right. She sensed it. She also had no idea how to find Johnny, and she knew she had even less chance of bringing him back.
Chapter 20. Amy, Melford Hall, Suffolk, May 1559. It was a long journey from Throcking into Suffolk, further than I had gone to carry Robert's messages to the Princess Elizabeth in Hatfield, further than I had travelled alone before. I say alone, but of course I was not. I had a maid with me, and a groom, and I had the escort of William Hyde himself. He had little choice but to fall in with my plans, not when I had told him that I knew he was robbing my lord of sums of money considerably larger than those I stole myself. William had been quite unable to believe me when I had told him that if he did not accommodate my plans, I would tell Robert about his dealings. He had goggled at me, as though the curtains themselves had spoken, so accustomed was he to thinking I was of no account. Although, at first, he had laughed. "He will not believe you," he said contemptuously. "Sir Robert knows that I am his loyal servant."
"I have copies of the accounts, Mr. Hyde," I said sweetly. Did you think I could not read? Could not count?
What did you think I did with all my time here in the back of nowhere? Oh, of course. You never considered it. Well, now you know. He had goggled at me some more. He had blustered. But when I asked him to apprise me of Robert's exact whereabouts, for naturally Robert had not seen fit to tell me himself, he gave in.
Sir Robert is in Suffolk, he said sulkily. He has business there.
The Queen's business? I asked, and saw by the way his gaze slid from mine that my guess was correct. He had gone to meet with Elizabeth in secret. This interested me, for the past 6 months had been full of nothing but gossip of how he was forever in her company at court. They danced together, rode together, dined together. Whilst I was left to rot in the country, they made Elizabeth's new kingdom their playground. They made no secret of their preference for each other's company, so whatever had taken Robert on this clandestine journey had to be very important. You will escort me into Suffolk, then, I said, for I too have business with him. William had looked properly appalled, but I was insistent, and he seemed so stunned at the change in me that he agreed.
Sir Robert stays at Melford Hall,
he informed me sullenly, and now, as he raised his hand to knock at the door of this fine manor, I thought what a very beautiful place Robert had chosen for his tryst with the Queen. No backstairs tumble for her. The appalled expression on the face of the steward when William Hyde introduced me was a mirror for Hyde's own a few days past. I walked straight inside. Pray, do not trouble to announce me to my lord, I said airily. I will announce myself.
Madam,
the steward was ashen.
I do not believe Sir Robert is expecting you.
No, I said. That is rather the point. Though the steward was struck dumb, and Hyde was watching, grim-faced and silent, it was not difficult to work out where Robert was housed. I simply followed a servant carrying wine. He knocked at a chamber door, and having been given the word to enter, I followed him in. Robert was sprawled in a chair before the fire. He was alone. I had guessed he would be, as had the Queen been present, Hyde and the steward between them would have made more effort to detain me. As it was, perhaps they wanted to witness what would happen when Robert's docile wife turned. I thought I would find you here, Robert, I said. I stripped off my gloves and threw them down on the chest. I realized that I was enjoying this. I felt a rush of power and excitement. I see you were expecting company, I added, glancing at the table set for two, the silver plate and the fine crystal, the flagon of wine. I'm sure she would not begrudge me refreshment. I have travelled a long way to see you. Robert leaped to his feet. It was the first time in all our acquaintance that I had been able to surprise him. It was most gratifying. He ran a hand through his hair, ruffling it like a nervous schoolboy.
How did you know where I was?
Oh, I glanced over my shoulder towards the passage. William told me. He escorted me here. I raised a brow. Surely you did not think I came alone.
William Hyde?
He looked confused.
But
I know, I said. He is supposed to be your loyal man, but I found a way to persuade him. I saw Robert absorb the news of William's betrayal. His mouth set grimly. He did not care for disloyalty.
how?
He said. That need not concern you, I said. You cannot dismiss him, I added gently. We need him. His dark gaze snapped up to mine.
What do you mean?
I poured for myself, since surprise seemed to have robbed him of his manners. I noted, that my hand was quite steady. Robert was not so in command of himself. His gaze darted repeatedly to the open door, so I walked over and closed it. "Pray, sit down," I said. "Do not agitate yourself. If the Queen comes—" I smiled. "Well, for once, she will have to concede her place to your wife." He shot me a look of pure hatred. "Her Majesty does not care to be kept waiting." I shrugged. "I can only imagine how difficult your life must be in that case." I raised my glass in a mocking toast. "To your future happiness." Robert poured a glass too, slopping the red wine onto the cloth, where it spread like a bloodstain. He drank it down in one gulp. "Why are you here?" he asked. "To negotiate a truce," I said. "To suggest a solution." I sat, arranging my skirts carefully. "You want to marry the Queen," I said. "I want to be free. There is a way for us both to get what we want." He stared at me. I waited to see if he would insult me with some sort of conventional denial, an expression of shock, or a false vow of affection. To his credit, he did none of those. That time was past, and we both knew it. "The Queen would never marry me," he said, "even if I were free." I thought this was probably true. From the moment I had seen Elizabeth at Hatfield, I had doubted that she would marry anyone, no matter how her advisers urged her to make a foreign alliance. Danger and experience had taught her to be wary. She would never risk compromising her power as her sister had done, never risk putting herself and her country in any man's hands. She loved Robert. She had said so. I thought she loved him a great deal, but not quite enough to put him above all else. And, being Elizabeth, she probably thought she could demand his love, his adoration, his attention, his devotion, and everything else she wanted, without giving him the ultimate prize. My aim, however, was to convince Robert of the opposite, because only if he believed he had a chance to wed her would he agree to my plan. I did not think this would be too difficult. Robert's weakness had always been his arrogance and ambition. He would want to believe he could change Elizabeth's mind and persuade her to marry him. If the path were clear. "She would change her mind," I said, "if you were free. She loves you. She told me so herself." I saw a spark leap in his eyes. Then it dulled almost immediately. His mouth turned down at the corners. "Do you think I have not considered all possible ways to achieve it?" he said. He looked at me, his gaze shadowed now. The subject wearied him. I could see it was a familiar trap, an unbearable frustration. "There can be neither annulment nor divorce for us. This leaves only—" "Death," I said. The word dropped into the silence of the room like a stone in a deep pool. "Do not tell me," I said, "that you have not considered it." "Amy." He looked uncomfortable, sheepish, too committed to lie, yet too much of a coward to admit it. "Of course you have," I said. "How could you not wish it? I die, and the path is clear." He frowned fiercely. "I would never hasten your end if that is what you fear." I was not sure whether I believed him or not. In the whispering hall of mirrors I was imprisoned in, it was all too easy to believe rumour and gossip. I did not know whether they were true, or falsehood. Reason was slippery, but I grasped after it.
I do believe you,
I said, because to kill me would be a foolish thing to do, and though you may be a desperate man, I do not think you are a stupid one. I had his full attention now.
What do you mean?
If there was even the slightest suspicion that you had sought my death, I said carefully, your enemies would seize upon it. They would never let it be forgotten. The Queen cannot allow any rumour of foul play to besmirch her reputation. She would send you away, and your chance of marrying her would be gone forever. I saw the expression in his eyes, and knew in that moment that he had considered it. Perhaps he had even started to plan my murder. Desperate times bred desperate remedies, and if Robert had thought for even 1 second that he might get away with it, he would act. I should have felt afraid then, when I saw the depths to which he would go. But I did not. I sat back in my chair, stretching my aching limbs towards the fire, seeking the warmth and relaxation. It was pleasant in that little chamber, oddly comfortable and comforting, as though we were a long-married couple supping together. Think about it, I said. Don't be a fool, Robert. He had turned away from me, so that I could not read his expression. Not that I needed to see it to know. I had guessed, and guessed aright. But he did not want me to think he would have had me killed. He wanted me to believe that even with the stakes so high, he would have remained loyal to me. I knew better. It does not matter anyway, I said, as though he had spoken to deny his guilt. For there is another way. He looked at me as though he were seeing me for the first time, as though the assumptions he had made about me for all of our married life were dropping away at last.
Tell me,
he said. He refilled my glass. This time, his hand was completely steady. I can disappear, I said. To all intents and purposes, I would be dead. Only you and I, and whichever is the most trustworthy of your men, Anthony Forster perhaps, would know the truth. He waited. First, we must spend some time together in London, I said, to allay suspicion. We want people to think that we are reconciled.
the Queen,
He said at once.
she will not like it.
I felt a pang of irritation that when I was offering him all he ever wanted, still he was subject to her whims. You cannot tell her the truth, I said sharply. You will have to manage the situation. I will come to visit you. I smiled at his expression. He looked as though he had the toothache. It will not be so bad, I said. A few weeks only. He nodded. I could see he was eager to hear the meat of my suggestion, to work out whether it was worth the pain of Elizabeth making his life a misery for a while. When I leave, I said, I will go somewhere remote. Somewhere even more isolated than Throcking. I waited for the barb to bite. It was unkind of you to send me there, Robert, and simply forget about me.
I know.
He looked ashamed.
I was so angry with you. So angry with us.
He made a gesture of resignation.
I hated the situation I found myself in. I wanted so much to be free. I thought it would drive me insane with wanting.
That is why the knot must be cut, I said. I, too, wish to be free. He nodded again, so eager now, malleable in my hands.
How is it to be done?
Anthony Forster has a house at Cumnor in Oxfordshire, does he not? I said. I will go to stay there for a few months. He is the most well-respected of your men. People believe him honest. I smiled. That will be important.
Forster is a sound man,
Robert agreed. He is your paid flunky like the rest of them, I said cuttingly. But he is better at hiding his corruption. I had had years and years in which to observe Robert's retinue, and my observation was that men took their lead from their master. Just as Robert could be brutal and none too scrupulous in pursuit of what he wanted, so did they echo him in their different ways. Whilst I am at Cumnor, I continued, you will send me money and will arrange safe passage for me to Holland. I want false papers and a place to live. I saw Robert's eyes widen. His Adam's apple jumped as he swallowed. I know it can be done, I said calmly. Anything is possible if you wish it enough and can afford the price.
Yes.
I could see he was thinking hard and quickly.
It is possible, but...
I don't want to know the difficulties, I said. I want you to arrange it. You owe me that. I took a breath. And of course you will need to procure a body. Now he stared at me as though I was indeed insane. Come, Robert, I said. Do you think I do not know how your retainers are little better than a band of thugs? How they brawl and maim and even kill, and you spend a fortune to buy them out of jail and bribe judges and settle their affairs to avoid difficult questions asked. It would not be hard for Richard Varney or John Butler, or any number of them to provide you with the body of a woman of the right age, height, and colouring to match mine. Robert was looking a little sick. I was not sure whether he was repulsed at the thought that I knew all about his sins, or that I had the indelicacy to mention them. I do not scruple to talk of it, I said cheerfully, since both you and I know they are varlets and murderers. He ran an agitated hand through his hair.
Even if they were, he said, we cannot pass off some pox-ridden trull from the back streets of London as Lady Dudley. You think that if we dress her in your clothes and claim she died of a fever, people will be taken in?
He shook his head.
You are dreaming.
Not so. I sat forward, eager to make him see how it could be achieved. I have it all planned, I said. Of course, we will need some help, but not much. The fewer people who know, the better it will be. We can choose a day when the whole household is away, at a market or a fair perhaps. I could feign illness, but insist they go without me. I dismissed the detail with a wave of my hand. Your man brings the body in secret. That is why I think Cumnor Place serves us best. It is remote and lonely. Even better, I have learned that there is an outer stair to the tower there that is perfect for our purpose. A man could enter and leave the building unseen.
It is utter madness. Robert spoke violently. I should not encourage you in such intemperate ideas.
If you do not have the stomach for it, I said, I will achieve it alone. This is my future we speak of, as well as yours. How do you think it feels to be locked away in idleness, day after day, whilst my husband dances attendance on the Queen? When men speak of him as her favourite. I said the word as though it were poisoned. I have pride, Robert, and I have a desire to live the life I want as much as you do. I wish to be rid of you as much as you wish to be rid of me. He stood up. I could see that my words had stung him, and wondered if he had really thought that being Lady Dudley should have been enough for me, regardless of the price I paid.
How? He demanded. How will you achieve it? Will you persuade Forster as you persuaded Hyde? How did you do that? With your body? That is none of your affair, I said coldly, when the entire world gossips of your exploits with Her Majesty. Robert made a sound remarkably like a growl, but he subsided into his chair and glared at me from beneath lowered brows. Go on, he said curtly. Finish your fairy tale. Tell me what happens next.
We place the body at the base of the stair, I said, face down so it looks like a fall. I am spirited away to my new life. Anthony calls a couple of servants who recognise my clothing and will testify that I have had an accident. He then carries the woman to my chamber and locks the door. He formally identifies the body as mine and sends to tell you I have met with an untimely, tragic, but entirely innocent end. And what will happen when the household returns and sees the corpse? Robert spoke with heavy sarcasm. Do I have to pay them all off? Or are you expecting they will suffer from a collective blindness that will prevent them from noticing this woman is not you? Neither, I said. I tried not to sound too pleased with myself. They will not see the body, I said simply. It will already have been identified by someone who knows me. Why distress them with the sight of their dead mistress? Robert rolled his eyes. There would have to be an inquest. Of course, I said. But the jurors need not be known to me. I paused a moment to allow him to digest that. Why should they recognise my likeness? I pressed the point. A woman is dead. Anthony Forster tells them it is Lady Dudley. Why would they question? Robert was very still. To make all safe, I finished softly. You could choose a man to be foreman of the jury. A stranger to me, I added, but one who is beholden to you or to the Queen. There must be many such men anxious to oblige her. A Queen's man. Robert whispered the words. I thought he looked a little dazed. He would know nothing, I said, other than that it was in his interests to make sure all went smoothly with the inquest. He nodded. I could see that the flame of the idea had caught hold. All I had to do now was fan it into belief, but I needed to tread carefully. Too much fire and I might scare him away from the idea. In my favour was the fact that he wanted to believe the plan would work, because it could grant him his heart's desire. It has the merit of being quite simple, I said, when you consider it. A woman is dead, identified as Lady Dudley. I will be gone to a new life, and will never trouble you again. He stared at me for what seemed like the longest time, and then he raised his goblet to touch mine. Gold met gold with the softest kiss. Looking into his eyes, I saw how it might have been for us in a different place, a different time. An ambitious man with a clever, beautiful, and ambitious wife at his side. We might have risen high together, instead of which, for him to rise, I had to fall. This way we can both gain all we desire, I said. And after a moment, he smiled at me, and I almost fell in love with him all over again, until I remembered that she was coming, the Queen of England, and that if anyone was the Queen's true man, then it was he. So be it, he said, and our pact was made. Chapter 21. Lizzie, present day.
Lizzie had arranged to meet Arthur in one of the tea shops in Burford High Street. It was busy, full of shoppers and tourists, and it felt impersonal enough to give her confidence. Even so, she was edgy as she waited for him, checking the door every few seconds, aware that she didn't really know how to feel, or how it would be to see him again, let alone how to broach the subject of Johnny. Another night of broken sleep had done nothing other than give her a headache and convince her that her thoughts about Johnny's paranormal powers were the result of stress and tiredness. But even so, at the back of her mind, a stubborn instinct lingered that she was right.
"Is this neutral territory?"
Arthur inquired as he slid into the seat opposite her. She had been distracted by the appearance of tea in a big pot shaped like a thatched cottage, and had missed his arrival after all. He bent to brush her cheek with a light kiss, and the touch ran through her and made her disturbingly aware of him, even though it was all over in a second. "I thought it would be easier to meet here," Lizzie admitted. "I feel kind of nervous. I'm not sure why." She fidgeted with the teaspoon, looking up to see Arthur watching her with a smile in his eyes. Her stomach swooped.
"Me too,"
he said. "You?" Lizzie stared at him. "Nervous of me?"
"Not exactly of you,"
Arthur said.
"More of us."
He shrugged, slightly uncomfortably.
"Nothing about our relationship seems normal, you know."
Lizzie did know. She nodded. "How are you?" she asked.
"I'm doing all right."
Arthur's quiet words were belied by the deep lines of tiredness she could see in his face. She imagined that the constant worry of Johnny's disappearance must be endlessly stressful. "I guess the first thing I should say is thank you for calling Jules, and for standing bail for me," she said. "So, thank you." Arthur gave her a proper smile, and her heart turned over.
"You're welcome,"
he said.
"I trust you not to abscond."
He took off his jacket and sat back, looking around.
"They do great fruitcake here,"
he said.
"Would you like some?"
"I've already ordered a chocolate cupcake," Lizzie admitted. "I have a very sweet tooth." The cake arrived, and with it a latte for Arthur. He sat back in his chair and took a long, heartfelt swallow of the coffee, whilst Lizzie took the thatched roof lid off the teapot, stirred its contents and poured. She thought of all the things she needed to talk to him about, and tried to work out how to start. "Why did you do it?" she blurted out. "Why did you put up the bail money?" Arthur laughed.
"That's direct. Has no one ever done you a favour before?"
"Not on this scale," Lizzie said, "and not without wanting something in return." Arthur raised his brows.
"And that's cynical."
"You didn't tell the police about Johnny's notebook either," Lizzie said bluntly. "Why not?"
"Is this an interrogation?"
Arthur looked to be enjoying himself. "If you like," Lizzie said. "Why didn't you tell them?" Reaching into his pocket, Arthur tossed the green notebook down onto the table between them.
"I didn't think it would do you any favours if they knew it had been found in your flat."
"That's true," Lizzie said, "especially since Johnny's phone was apparently found there. Did you plant it on me?"
"I'd hardly plant one piece of incriminating evidence and remove another, would I?"
Arthur said. "You might," Lizzie said, "if it was a double bluff."
"I don't even begin to understand that,"
Arthur said. He leaned forward.
"Look, Lizzie, I'm a pretty straightforward sort of person. I don't play games. You'll just have to take my word for it that I didn't plant the phone on you. Anna says she didn't put it there either, so Johnny must have dropped it and you simply didn't notice sooner."
"I don't think so," Lizzie said, frowning.
Johnny told me he had left his phone in the car. Unfortunately, he didn't say who had given him a lift the night he came to find me. It was just a casual remark at the time, and I didn't think to ask. Well, it wasn't me, Arthur said, and Anna doesn't have a car. Okay. Lizzie's shoulders slumped. I suppose it's just another thing that doesn't make sense then. There was quiet for a moment. The waitress brought Arthur a piece of fruitcake and another chocolate cupcake for Lizzie. All around them the shop hummed with visitors and chatter. It felt warm, and the air was scented with freshly baked cakes. But Lizzie still felt edgy. She thought about letting the whole time travel thing go, ignoring her instincts and not saying anything to Arthur. Then she wondered if that made her sensible or just a coward. I had something else to ask you, she said in a rush. Her palm itched, and she closed her fingers tightly over it. This is going to sound weird, she said, but bear with me. Arthur looked amused. Is it weirder than all the other stuff that's already happened? Yes, Lizzie said. Much. She took a deep breath. Okay. I'm just going to go for it. You mentioned in passing that Johnny has a bit of a habit of disappearing. Dudley said the same thing. I wondered whether you meant he would just wander off somewhere to be on his own and then come back when he felt like it, or whether there was more to it than that. She saw Arthur's frown and hurried on. I mean, has he vanished for long periods of time before? Or has he, I don't know, just seemed to be there one moment and be gone the next? She thought she was probably expressing herself very badly, but couldn't see how to put it any better. She wasn't ready to blurt out that she thought Johnny travelled in time, and she didn't think Arthur would be ready to hear that either. Arthur started to speak, then checked himself. Why do you ask? He said quietly. Lizzie looked him in the eye. I can't tell you that right now. Please, Arthur, believe me, this is very important. All right, Arthur said. But tell me first what Dudley said. Not much, Lizzie said. It was whilst he was telling me about how he'd reported Johnny for threatening him. I'm afraid I jumped down his throat. I wish I hadn't now, but at the time I didn't realise how important it might be. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to remember Dudley's precise words. He said that Johnny was always saying weird stuff and appearing and disappearing like a ghost, and that once, at Oakhanger, Johnny and Amelia were playing some childish trick where he vanished like it was magic. Arthur had turned very pale, and his mouth was set in a grim line. It's odd you should mention that, he said slowly. Because my immediate reaction to what you asked was that, yes, Johnny would sometimes wander off on his own. But there was no more to it than that. Then I remembered something. Lizzie's heart speeded up. She found that she desperately wanted to eat another cupcake, as was so often the case when she felt stressed, but this wasn't the moment to order a third, so she sat on her hands. It was when Johnny was a kid, Arthur said. About 7 or 8, I suppose. We were at our dad's place in Norfolk, and Johnny just disappeared. Literally seemed to vanish into thin air. He was gone for hours. Jess, Johnny's mum, was frantic. We searched everywhere, and then he just popped up again, as though nothing had happened. He said he'd been playing with Amy. We assumed he meant Amelia, and that made Jess even angrier, because Amelia wasn't even there that day, so he had to be lying. Lizzie's mouth was dry. Perhaps he wasn't lying, she said. After all, that's pretty much what he's done now. There was a very long silence. She let it spin out.
Jules told me about the CCTV,
Arthur said at last.
I haven't seen it, but I have to admit that was what it sounded like.
He met her gaze.
You do know what you're suggesting?
He sounded almost angry.
You're implying that Johnny has the ability to travel to a different dimension of time, which is a physical impossibility.
By all conventional measures, Lizzie said steadily. All of the things we've been talking about are impossible. Psychometry, telepathy. She shrugged. If you believe that there are things we can neither explain nor understand scientifically, and manifestly there are, then this is only one other thing on the list. Arthur was silent again. His head was bent, and there was a heavy frown on his brow. Lizzie could sense his emotions, even though she wasn't touching him. There was anger and conflict in him, but she knew it was because he was very close to believing her, and he did not want to acknowledge that. It was way too much, too soon. She could understand that. She surreptitiously gestured to the waitress to bring her another cake.
Johnny could be in Scotland, or Peru, or on a beach in Bali,
Arthur said.
All of those are far more likely scenarios than that he's somehow gone back in time.
I agree, Lizzie said steadily. And if Johnny pops up having spent a fortnight in Bali, I'll be delighted. But I don't think he will. She leaned forward. You don't really think he will either, do you, Arthur? Arthur scrubbed an exasperated hand through his hair.
It's insane. Even if it were a physical possibility, why would he want to go back? Where would he go? What is he trying to achieve?
I think I know the answer to that, Lizzie said. I think Johnny believes that if he can change the past, he will be able to prevent Amelia's death.
The past can't be altered to change the present,
Arthur argued.
I'm not even going to start on the butterfly effect or parallel universes or all those theories.
He stopped.
Are you eating cake at a time like this? I can't help it,
Lizzie said, her mouth full of icing.
I have a sweet tooth and stress gives me a sugar craving.
She swallowed. Arthur, the point is not what we believe, but what Johnny believes. To stand any chance of finding him, we need to think like he did. Arthur swore.
You really believe this, don't you?
His dark gaze fastened on her.
Shit.
He shook his head.
I can't believe we're even talking about this, and at the same time I can. Because of this.
He touched Johnny's green notebook.
I think you said you didn't ever get the chance to look through it properly.
Lizzie shook her head. After I'd tried to use it to connect to Johnny that first time, I was too exhausted and disturbed to touch it again, she said.
It makes for interesting reading, Arthur said, especially in view of your theory about Johnny. I thought at first that it was notes for a history project. Johnny's studying history along with maths and design at school in Oxford. Then I realised it was much more than that.
He gave the book a little push towards Lizzie.
Take a look,
he said.
I don't think it will hurt you now. It feels as though its power is spent somehow, if that makes sense.
Lizzie touched the cover gingerly. Arthur was right. There was no flash of sensation this time, no visions, no sense of Johnny's emotions when he had written his notes. It was as though he had somehow severed his connection to it, and it was now nothing more than a pile of pages. Curious, though, she opened it. Just as she remembered, there were endless scribbles, diagrams and drawings, sprawling charts that looked like family trees, dates with more jottings written over the top, crossings out and different colours, chaotic and rambling. She found the Robsart family tree and started to read. Sir John Robsart, she said. Born circa 1480, son of Terence and Lucy Robsart. Married Elizabeth Scott, one child, Amy, born 1532, died 1560. Lizzie noticed that Amy had been 28 when she had died, just like Amelia. She read the next line of Johnny's notes. Amy had one elder half-brother, Arthur Robsart, son of Sir John Robsart and an unnamed mother, illegitimate but accepted into the family, and a number of other half-siblings. She looked up and met Arthur's unreadable dark gaze. The similarities are uncanny, aren't they? He said evenly. I was reading about Amy Robsart last night, Lizzie said. This was exactly what set me thinking about Johnny's reasons for disappearing. Avery mentioned Amy to me. You remember Avery Basing? She sold Oakhanger Hall to Amelia. Then, when Arthur nodded, she went on. I don't know much about Amy. I haven't had the chance yet to find out about her, but Avery drew my attention to the parallels between Amelia's death and Amy's. She glanced back down at Johnny's notes. It seems that Johnny had worked all that out for himself. Yeah, Arthur said. That, and much more. He shifted in his seat. Johnny's notes suggest that Amelia's death was part of a replicating pattern that has played out a number of times down the centuries. It hasn't just happened once, and all the deaths are connected in some way to Amy Robsart, or Cumnor Hall, or later, Oakhanger. Lizzie was silent. Around her she was aware of the chink of china and the hum of voices, the repeated ring of the bell as the shop door opened, the scent of cinnamon and chocolate. It felt reassuring and distant at the same time. Avery suggested much the same thing, she said. She thinks there is something evil trapped in the fabric of Oakhanger Hall, and that it draws on the original tragedy of Amy Robsart's death. Despite the scented warmth of the shop, she shuddered. Her tea had gone cold. She looked around for a waitress to request a refill. That sounds like stone tape theory, Arthur said. Then, at her blank look, explained. It was a Victorian pseudoscience and became fashionable all over again in the 1970s, when someone made a movie about it. Stone tape theory. Lizzie picked up the notebook again. Isn't there something about that in here? She flicked through the pages. Yes, here. She read aloud from Johnny's notes. The stone tape theory speculates that inanimate materials can absorb energy from living beings. A recording is laid down during moments of high tension or emotion. This stored energy can then be released, resulting in a display of the recorded activity. In some cases, place memories can be replayed by gifted individuals who claim to be able to interact with the events that are released. She looked up. I guess that individual would be me, she said bleakly. That's what happened at Baynard's Castle, except that I was the one who released the memory, and Johnny was the one who interacted with it. It was just like reading an object, only more intense. It's hard to believe that Johnny set all this up, Arthur said. Would he really stitch you up like this? He seemed to quite like you. I think he felt bad about it, Lizzie said. But yeah, I do believe that he was so fixated on saving Amelia that he would have done just about anything to achieve that. I guess so, Arthur said. You know, you're the Queen Elizabeth I equivalent in this version of the story, if Johnny's theory is to be believed. Which has to be one of the most bizarre aspects of this apparent repeating pattern, Lizzie said. I'm nothing like her. There are similarities. For the first time in a long while, Arthur smiled. The red hair, the strong personality, and he nodded at the crumbs on her plate. The sweet tooth. You mean I'm a diva? Lizzie said. She sighed. Well, you could be right. She looked round. The tea shop had emptied whilst they were sitting there, and the staff were rather ostentatiously polishing the tables and looking at them sideways. I think we've outstayed our welcome, she said. They want to clean up. We'd better go. They paid the bill and went out onto the high street. Daylight was fading. The church clock chimed 5. The stream of cars up the hill seemed relentless. It's an odd mix, isn't it? Lizzie said. All this noise and modernity in a place that looks like a costume drama film set. It's managed to keep its character, though, despite everything, Arthur said. Burford's a beautiful place. I'll drive you back, he added. Protect you from the paparazzi. Thanks, Lizzie said. She pulled on a felt hat of her grandmother's that was adorned with an outsized flower. That hat totally works, Arthur said, straight-faced. No one will recognize you at all. I'm sure no one cares, really, Lizzie said, sliding into the passenger seat of the Land Rover. It's refreshing. Actually, I could walk, she added as the vehicle roared into life, setting the little phoenix charm above the dashboard swinging and making a number of tourists jump. I'm only 2 minutes away. It's no problem, Arthur said. He pulled out into the traffic and waved his thanks. I'd like to see the High. It's supposed to be a nice example of Georgian architecture. It's not a good example of anything at the moment, Lizzie said. Apart from what can happen when nature takes over. Renovating is on my list of things to do, she added, along with trying to decide what I want to do next with my life. Any thoughts? Arthur gave her a sideways glance. I know you said you were planning on writing music again, but you could do anything else you want to. Travel, go to university, set up a charity. Or all of those, Lizzie said. I'll let you know. The High is here on the left, she added, gesturing to him to go through the wrought iron gates. I told you it was close. The Land Rover roared over the gravel and drew to a stop at the front door. The High is an interesting name, Arthur said, considering it's halfway down the hill. Where did it come from? I've no idea, Lizzie said. I'll ask Avery. She's bound to know. Before I forget, there was one other thing I wanted to tell you. Only the one? Arthur said. It's the Stone Angel, Lizzie said. The one that Johnny took the night he disappeared. That day at Amelia's wedding when I cut my hand on the gazing ball and you bandaged me up. Yes. Arthur was smiling at the memory. You were a sulky teen in those days. Lizzie pulled a face. Please, don't remind me, she sighed. When I touched the Stone Angel that afternoon, I saw a vision. Or, more accurately, I experienced one. She swallowed hard, holding Arthur's gaze. Arthur, I felt as though I was falling. I could feel the air rushing past, and I felt utterly terrified. She broke off. I think I'm scared that I foresaw Amelia's death. Or had a flashback to Amy's, Arthur said grimly. He put his hand over hers. God, Lizzie, how horrible. His grip was warm and strong. Lizzie had the sense of him drawing comfort from her touch, as much as giving it. I know, Lizzie said miserably. I wish none of this had ever happened. I wish I'd never met Dudley, and I wish I didn't have this gift and that I didn't think Johnny was lost. Hey, Arthur said. He put his arms around her and drew her closer. It was awkward trying to hug in the Land Rover, but she really didn't mind, because it was lovely.
We're all tired and emotional, Arthur said against her hair. Don't think about it for now.
Lizzie tilted her face up to look at him. She could smell the scent of his skin and feel the warmth of him. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry.
I sometimes wonder what it would be like if we... She stopped. I wonder about that too, Arthur said. His gaze held hers.
Lizzie took his face in her hands and kissed him before she could change her mind. For a second, he didn't respond, and terrifyingly she could read nothing of his emotions. And then, everything changed. He slid a hand behind her head, and the kiss became hotter and more urgent, and Lizzie felt the emotion explode, fusing his feelings with her own and leaving her in freefall.
I have a sense,
Arthur said, as they finally broke apart,
that we've just made everything a whole lot more complicated.
Well, at least now we know, Lizzie said. We'd better avoid doing that again. It could ruin the experience with anyone else. She saw Arthur smile.
Tell me again that you've never had this sort of connection with anyone before.
Lizzie couldn't begin to deal with how she was feeling. It happens to me with everyone I kiss, she said shakily. It's very commonplace. I'd be lying if I said otherwise.
I don't believe you.
Arthur put his arms around her and kissed her again. She could feel him smiling against her mouth. This time, there was no hesitancy, simply a rush of physical sensation that almost swept her away.
Lizzie Kingdom,
Arthur said, his lips an inch away from hers.
Who would have thought?
Then,
I should go. I really should.
Lizzie hesitated for a split second. She was aware of the conflict inside her, the old fear of intimacy, the need for emotional safety versus an excitement so vivid it lit her up. She'd never felt like this before. She had had no idea. All the times she had thought that there was something wrong with her because she didn't want a relationship, she just wasn't that into someone. Stay with me, she said. Arthur, stay with me. Please. Chapter 22. Amy, Cumnor Place, Oxfordshire, April 1560. It had been a day of sharp little gusts of wind that raised the tapestries from the wall at Cumnor Place, and squally showers that shattered on the diamond window panes. By 4 o'clock, evening was already drawing in, and the promise of spring that had set the daffodils dancing only the day before had vanished. The day was dark, but my mood was fair. Revenge on Robert for all the neglect and injustices and humiliation he had piled upon me was a wonderful tonic. I sat before the mirror in my grand chamber, brushing my hair slowly, dreamily, as I imagined what my life might be in the future. In the chest beside me, hidden beneath the folded clothes, the gloves, shawls, petticoats, and gowns of a quality appropriate to the wife of the Queen's favourite, was the money I had accumulated. Since coming to Cumnor, I had been performing the most elaborate show. My entire life was now a play, a performance of devotion to my absent husband, of mute acceptance of his neglect, a display of sweet nature and pliability. Occasionally I would allow my sadness to show, as I had the previous day when Sir Anthony Forster had invited our neighbours to dine, and I had mournfully pushed my food about my plate, rousing myself to smile and make conversation before sinking into reverie again. It was this pretty display of patience
that had prompted my friends to visit me that afternoon, to cheer my mood, or perhaps to feed on my misery. I did not care either way. They, too, were unwitting actors in my play. They had clattered into the parlour. "Dearest Amy, we are here to lift your spirits." Lady Pollard had brought me sweetmeats and was sympathetic. "Our poor dear Amy, what a cross you have to bear." Mrs. Wainman was soothing and gave me a vial of sweet wine to help me sleep. "I am sure Robert will send for you to join him at court soon," she said, her gaze darting away from mine as she spoke. We both knew she lied. Mrs. Mutlow was bracing, and as usual, she had brought nothing but trenchant advice. "Perhaps if you were to take the air more, you would find that your humour improved," she said. Mrs. Mutlow, so conscious that she was lower born than the rest of us, made a virtue of plain speaking. "I'm a plain woman, and I speak as I find," she would say. In truth, I knew that they were all gleeful to discover me still so downcast. Misery loves company. Their lives were almost as tedious as mine, and it comforted them to see that, for all my name and my status, I had a worse time of it than they. I was very glad of their spite. From the moment I had come to Cumnor Place, I had used them to spread the rumours I wanted told against Robert. "Poor Amy Dudley is ailing again. She is so neglected she is in despair. She has a malady of the breast. She fears poison." For the past 6 months, I had watched and listened as the stories of my unhappy life rippled outward like water from a tainted pool. I had followed their journey in my mind as they flowed from neighbour to neighbour, through alehouses and inns. I knew that they would run like a plague of rats through the villages and towns, as far as all the great houses of England, and that was what gossip and scandal did. In time, the tide of it would reach London and the court of Queen Elizabeth herself, where my husband basked in her laughter and occupied her virgin's bed. "The wife of the Queen's favourite is such a sweet-natured, beautiful lady. She has been shamefully abandoned, and is in fear of her life." I had even greater ambitions for those stories. I wanted them to take sail across the sea to the courts of Europe, travelling through ambassadors' quills and merchants' talk, until they returned to England much embroidered. I wanted the whole country, the whole of Europe, to hate my husband. Robert, of course, had no notion how I stoked that fire of scandal. He wrote to me complaining that men spoke against him and that it would ruin all our plans. I wrote back soothingly, telling him I did all that I could to stem the flow of malice. "My friends know how content I am," I wrote, "and will spread the word to counter these vicious slanders." Alas, for Robert, he believed me. The hope that he would soon be free to court the Queen dazzled him even more than before. He was drunk on her presence, on her very being. I hated that she possessed the power to entrance him so, but I could see its uses. She kept him occupied. His obsession addled his brain, and he had no more idea that I was deceiving him than that he could fly to the moon. Poor Robert. He never divined my plan, that I would take his money and his papers and begin my new life, while he was perpetually locked into the old one. I knew that no matter how or why I died, Robert's enemies would use it against him. He would never be able to escape the shadow of suspicion. It was a nightmare malady, incurable. The Queen would not marry him. He would never attain his heart's desire. Cruel revenge, perhaps, but he had stolen my life. I could have been a wife and mother,
the mistress of a fine house and a great estate, not some wraith passing from place to place. "You will be properly mourned," he had promised me on the last occasion we had met in London. "The whole court will observe it, and I will give you a grand funeral to match your state." Perhaps he thought I would thank him, this man who was already thinking of me as dead. The only pang of sorrow I felt was for my brother, Arthur. I had no wish to cause him pain. Anna, I thought, would not miss me, but Arthur had been a true and steadfast friend to me through all, and it gave me some guilt to think that I was deliberately deceiving him. I entertained the idle idea that one day I might write to him from my new life. Yet I knew I could not. That afternoon, when Lady Pollard and Mrs. Wainman and Mrs. Mutlow had gone, I sat alone in the parlour for a little. My hands were idle, but my mind was busy. The rumours were sown now, and it was time to begin the next part of my plan. It was time to give my lord's letter of instruction to Sir Anthony Forster. I stood up and smoothed the skirts of my gown. It was a new one, satin trimmed, with lace and ribbons tied in true lovers' knots. I loved the deep indigo blue of it. It spoke of innocence and heavenly grace. Down in the cross passage, I met one of the maids. "Is Sir Anthony in his study?" I inquired. "I have a commission for him." "I need him to arrange my death." She dropped a curtsy and murmured her assent. I felt her gaze on my back as I walked away. I knew there would be pity in it. She, like all the others, believed me to be ill-used. My hand was raised to knock on the study door. I felt the rush of cold air as the main door creaked open. I turned. The maid had gone, and there was no one in the passage. The shadows shifted. Cobwebs scuttered across the flagstones of the floor. It felt as though the world paused for a moment in its turning. I saw the boy standing beneath the arch of the tower door. The same boy I had seen at Baynard's castle, and had thought a ghost. As before, he was dressed in a hooded cape of black, with boots and hose, and he looked young and gaunt. In his eyes was a desperation that clutched at my heart. "Amy," he said. "Oh dear God, I have found you." He spoke as though he knew me. But then over the years I had found that many people pretended to an acquaintance they did not possess. Usually, it was because they hoped I had influence with Robert, although that had not happened recently, of course. I thought him a beggar boy, down on his luck. He certainly looked thin and threadbare enough. "If you go around to the kitchens," I said, "they will feed you." I recoiled as he stepped forward and grabbed my arm. "No," he said. "Listen to me." He fumbled in the leather satchel that he wore across one shoulder. "Remember this?" he said. "You gave it to me when I was a child." He held out to me a little ornament, an angel carved from stone. It was a pretty piece, head bent, wings folded, hands outstretched as though in supplication. It did look familiar to me, but I could not place it. I looked at him in bafflement. Poor boy. Not only was he a beggar, but surely his mind was turned. The thought prompted me to speak gently to him. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't remember. But tell me how I can help you." He laughed a little wildly at that. "It is I who have come to help you," he said. He stepped so close I felt his breath on my cheek. He smelled of sweat and chalk dust from the roads, and I tried not to shrink from him. "Your husband plans to murder you in secret," he whispered. "He will send a man to push you down the stairs here at Cumnor Hall.
You were to fall and break your neck. You must save yourself. Get away from this place.
The shock was absolute. This time I was the one who grabbed him, my nails digging into his arm. "Do not speak of this," I hissed. I could see at once what had happened. One of Robert's retainers had spoken loosely during a drunken night in the brothels or stews, and this foolish boy thought to profit by it. Or perhaps he truly believed he could help me. I knew not. All I knew was that if a word of the plan, garbled or not, was to escape ahead of time, everything would be ruined. "Go," I said. I pushed him towards the door. "Go, and never mention a word of this again, or I will see to it that my husband's retainers would hunt you down and kill you." He scrambled back from me, his white face a mask of horror.
"You do not understand,"
he started to say, but I gave him no time. The wind caught the oaken door again, and it yawned wide, and I pushed him hard out into the porch. He fell, sprawling on the cobbles. He was there one moment. I saw the shock and despair in his face, and then, what seemed like a mere second later, he had vanished. Chapter 23. Lizzie, present day. Lizzie sat in the garden at the High, her tablet in her hand. The afternoon was mildly melancholy. There was the imprint of autumn in the way that the bars of low sun striped the grass, and in the little breeze that chased the already fallen leaves. She was wearing a pair of her grandmother's trousers and a big wool jumper that had belonged to her grandfather. Her own bags, which Jules had so kindly dragged all the way from London, remained largely unopened. Over the crumbling dry stone wall, she could hear Avery exhorting her gardener to chop down the Leylandii hedge,
"Because dearest Elizabeth would never sue us."
It was odd, but comfortable to be in a place where she could hear the lives of other people unfolding around her. The sounds from the high street, the church bells, and the snatches of conversation. She realised that everything about her flat had been designed to cut out this sort of interaction. It was isolation, masquerading as privacy and luxury. She had appreciated that sometimes, when life had been so manic. But now, she realised how apart she had become, how divorced from reality. Her life was opening up again, and it felt good. Arthur had left for Oakhanger Hall that morning, and had rung her to say that Sam Appleyard, Johnny's stepfather, had finally got back from the Antarctic, and that the police were coming over to brief him on the investigation. Lizzie had felt a huge burst of joy just to hear Arthur's voice, and then she had felt horribly guilty that in the middle of so much grief and uncertainty, she felt so happy. She took a deep breath of the wood, smoke-scented air, wrapped an old tartan rug more closely around her legs, and opened up her tablet, typing in the name, Amy Robsart. She'd had some vague idea that, in the absence of any other clues to Johnny's disappearance, the more she could learn about Amy, the more it might help. First, she looked for a portrait, and found some suitably melodramatic ones painted by the Pre-Raphaelites that showed Amy's prone body tumbled at the bottom of the Cumnor stair. That was not what she wanted, though. Searching again, she found a little miniature that historians had identified as possibly Amy Robsart. It was pretty and innocent-looking, with the sitter recorded as aged 18 years, her bodice adorned with a brooch that combined a spray of oak leaves and some yellow flowers. Lizzie's first thought was that she looked remarkably like Amelia had done when they'd all attended a medieval banquet as part of some event organised by Dudley's management years ago. It was uncanny. She turned to the written articles. There were hundreds, thousands of entries listed. The mysterious circumstances of Amy's death had clearly fascinated people for centuries. Lizzie deliberately chose a modern interpretation of events to try to counterbalance the blatant prejudice she had read in Hugh Tay's 19th century version. Amy Robsart, she discovered, had died on the 8th of September, 1560. Her body was found at the foot of a staircase at Cumnor Place. Amy had been living there as the guest of one of her husband's friends, whilst her husband of 10 years, Robert Dudley, had been up to various hijinks with the Queen back in Windsor. The circumstances had not initially been considered suspicious. In fact, the implication was that it might have been suicide rather than murder. The servants said that Amy had been in a strange mood that morning, very insistent that they all go to the fair in Abingdon and leave her alone. When some of them refused because it was unseemly on a Sunday, she became angry with them. There were also plenty of acquaintances ready to come forward to say how unhappy Amy had been, that she had been ill and depressed, that she was suffering as a result of Robert's neglect, because his only interest was spending time with the Queen. Lizzie winced. Guilt pricked her. She and Dudley might not have had exactly the same sort of relationship as Elizabeth and Robert, but there were sufficient similarities to make her feel very uncomfortable. She read on. On the other hand, the author of the article reported austerely, there are historians who have pointed out that Amy's letters were cheerful and positive, that she had bought some new clothes, and that she seemed excited about something. Conflicting evidence, Lizzie muttered, is clearly nothing new.
It most certainly is not,
Avery said from behind her.
Only think of the different theories about the princes in the tower.
Oh, hello, Aunt Avery, Lizzie said, smiling. I didn't see you there. She gestured to the chair next to her. Would you like a glass of that lovely lemonade you left for me? Have you slaughtered the Leylandii to your satisfaction? She went to fetch a glass, whilst Avery laid her gardening gloves and secateurs on the table and eased herself into the cushioned seat.
You're studying that poor child, Amy Robsart,
Avery said when Lizzie came back.
Did she fall? Was she pushed? Or did she jump?
Something of the sort, Lizzie agreed. It would be heartbreaking to think that she took her own life because she was so unhappy. She felt another jolt of guilt, remembering the Z-list celebrities who had crawled out of the woodwork to say the same when Amelia had died.
Suicides were denied burial in consecrated ground in those days,
Avery said somberly.
It was considered shameful and wrong in the eyes of the church. By all accounts, Amy Robsart was well liked. I doubt anyone would have wanted her memory besmirched by the church's condemnation. If she did take her own life, they would probably have covered it up.
That's an interesting idea, Lizzie said. You would have thought that a verdict of suicide would suit Robert Dudley best, though. That way no one could accuse him of murdering Amy to get her out of the way so he could marry the Queen.
Yes,
Avery said.
But perhaps even Robert couldn't face condemning Amy's immortal soul, no matter how little he cared for her anymore. Certainly he pushed for an inquest and declared he wanted there to be no doubt in anyone's mind that Amy's death had been a complete accident.
She sighed.
A lot of historians feel he tried to influence the inquest jury. You certainly don't hear a word of regret or sorrow from him about Amy's actual death, though. He knew he had lots of enemies, and that they would accuse him of her murder, and he was determined it wouldn't be allowed to queer his pitch with the Queen. No, a complete accident was the only outcome for him because he would have been blamed for her suicide as surely as he was for her murder.
You know a lot about it, Lizzie said. I'm only just starting to find out the story.
Oh, I've read about it a lot over the years,
Avery said vaguely.
Poor child. Amy, I mean. Her story has a hold on the imagination. We always want to know the truth about a historical mystery, even when it isn't possible to be certain.
Amy's death does feel like an accident, Lizzie said, because surely even the most dim-witted of murderers would realise that for Amy to die at all would be a disaster for Robert Dudley's reputation. And from what little I've read about him, I'd say that Robert Dudley was many things, but not a fool.
You're talking with the benefit of hindsight, Elizabeth,
Avery pointed out.
We know now that Amy's death forever ruined Robert Dudley's chances of marrying the Queen, but that might not have been apparent to him at the time. He was dazzled by ambition and drunk on the life he was living. Nothing and no one was going to get in the way of him achieving all that he wanted. He lived in a bubble far removed from reality, I think, and that sort of existence warps your reality.
Just like being a celebrity, Lizzie agreed, with a grimace. What happened after Amy's death?
She was buried at St. Mary's Church in Oxford,
Avery said.
It was a lavish funeral, but Robert Dudley didn't attend.
That looks bad, Lizzie said.
It wasn't unusual in the Tudor period,
Avery said.
And perhaps it was fortuitous, because when the vicar gave his sermon, he referred to Amy being so pitifully murdered, which he then tried to pass off as a slip of the tongue.
Oh, God, Lizzie said. How awkward.
Amy's tomb is long gone,
Avery said. Her blue eyes were distant.
It was dismantled in the late 18th century, leaving only a plaque in the choir to commemorate her death.
It feels as though they were trying to tidy her away, Lizzie said, as though it had never happened.
Certainly, I think Robert Dudley wished he could forget about it,
Avery said dryly.
It haunted him forever after. When Amy's half-brother, John Appleyard, expressed concerns that her death had never been properly explained and that he was sure it was murder, he was imprisoned and questioned by the Privy Council. He very quickly changed his mind.
That sounds like intimidation, Lizzie said. A thought occurred to her. What did Arthur Robsart have to say about Amy's death? She asked.
He never expressed any doubt over the legitimacy of the inquest's findings,
Avery said.
So one can only assume that he believed that it was an accident. Whether Arthur liked his brother-in-law or not was a different matter, I imagine, but Arthur Robsart always was... She paused. Discreet.
So Johnny was the one who stirred up trouble then as now, Lizzie said thoughtfully. The parallels seem endless.
But the pattern is always different,
Avery said.
Each time it happens, it changes.
Despite the warmth of the early autumn sun, Lizzie shivered. You mentioned before that there was a repeating pattern. Have other people died?
3 times, to my knowledge, Elizabeth dear,
Avery said.
There was an Amias Latimer who was a clerk in holy orders in Oxford in the 17th century. The details are vague because it was a delicate case under the civil and ecclesiastical laws of the time, but it seems he was involved in a love triangle with 2 of his fellow scholars, both male. He died in a fall down the tower stair in the Church of St. Mary by Amy's tomb. It was ruled to be an accident, but there were questions raised of both suicide and murder. It was quite a scandal at the time, despite the attempts of the authorities to hush it up.
How horrible, Lizzie said. And the other ones?
Well, there was Amethyst Green, Avery said. That was the case that first caught my attention, because it happened at Oakhanger when I was a child. She was the scullery maid. She fell from the roof of the hall. My family spun the story to look like a sad tale of a servant who had got herself into trouble and committed suicide in a fit of despair, but even as a child I guessed it was probably a lot more complicated than that. There were hints of a love triangle with 2 of my uncles.
She pulled a face.
It's impossible to be sure what really happened, though, when the testimony at the time was heavily influenced by what people were paid or persuaded to say.
I'm so sorry,
Lizzie said fiercely.
The injustice of it is awful.
Amy and all the others whose voices weren't heard because the rich and powerful were able to silence them.
They even tried to silence Amy's ghost,
Avery agreed.
There are stories of her haunting Cumnor and other places. Have you read the tale of the clergyman from Oxford who tried to confine her spirit to the citrine pool?
No. Lizzie shuddered. She drew her tablet towards her. I must read about that.
It feels as though it is time to end Amy's unhappiness,
Avery said. She put her hand over Lizzie's.
I rely on you, Elizabeth. I have great hopes. You could have turned your back on Johnny Robsart and refused to help him, but you did not. That was the first change to the pattern. Now it is up to you to break it completely and prevent this tragedy repeating again.
Lizzie stared at her. Do you really believe that? Avery nodded.
It's been hard,
she said, almost to herself.
To be no more than a witness all these years, hoping and praying that somehow someone would be brave enough to break the curse.
I don't know how to do it, Lizzie confessed. I feel completely out of my depth. Suddenly, Avery looked tired, Lizzie thought, older and frailer. Her energy and exuberance so often eclipsed the fact that she was very elderly indeed. Lizzie felt a pang of fear. She had only just found Avery again, and she didn't want to lose her.
We all feel that at times,
Avery said quietly.
The only advice I can give you, Elizabeth, is to remember that truth is so often a matter of perception. It is very easy to be misdirected, especially if we want to be. I cannot tell you what will happen. There are always different futures. I can only hope you will choose the right one.
Avery picked up her gardening gloves. Lizzie handed her the secateurs and saw that her gaze was bright again, that sharp, blue glance that had seen so much and knew so much.
You should never be afraid of your gift, Elizabeth,
Avery said gently.
You are strong. You always have been. When the time comes, you must use it to the full.
She kissed Lizzie's cheek and wandered away down the steps towards the gap in the Lelandii hedge, leaving Lizzie wondering exactly what gifts Avery possessed herself. The phone rang shrilly on the table beside Lizzie's tablet. She blinked as it pulled her back to the moment. She didn't really want to answer. She wanted to sit here and think, and enjoy the timeless peace of the high, which was starting to feel properly hers, her home, her place of belonging, her past, but also her future. The phone rang, on and on. She picked it up. Hello? She said. Lizzie! It was Johnny's voice. Lizzie, I'm back at Oakhanger Hall. Please, will you come over? I need to talk to you. Chapter 24. Amy, Cumnor Place, the 8th of September, 1560. We had laid our plans very carefully for the day of my death. Anthony, having made all the arrangements, had absented himself from Cumnor. It was vital that no suspicion should attach to him, for later he would be the man who identified the body as mine. Richard Varney, the most thuggish of my husband's entourage, was the man who was providing a fresh corpse. Backstreet Alley murders were of no consequence to him. Robert had already brought him out of prison twice for stabbing a man to death. If I had the slightest qualm for the poor woman whose fate would enable me to fulfill mine, I repressed it. I asked no questions of how she might meet her end, in a manner that would fool any inquest jury. I did not want to know. There was a fair in Abingdon that day. I gave the entire household permission to attend. More than that, I encouraged it, offering them some coin as an inducement. I thought that with money in their pockets, none would decline. But that was where I faced my first problem, for two of Sir Anthony's servants, Mrs. Owen and Mrs. Oddingsells, refused to go. Mrs. Owen was elderly, and Mrs. Oddingsells pious, and both were as awkward as two old women could be.
No Christian woman should attend the fair on a Sunday,
Mrs. Oddingsells told me sharply. From the start, she had resented my place in the household, usurping the authority and the status of her mistress, Sir Anthony's wife.
Mrs. Owen and I shall stay in the solar.
You may do as you wish, I said with a shrug. I knew they would be playing at cards, which was as reprehensible as going to the fair. I would not argue, though. There were more important matters to attend to. I went to my chamber and started to pack my travelling bag, one case only, for I needed to travel quick and light. That was why I did not see her when she first came. I was too preoccupied in choosing between two pairs of gloves, which to take, which to leave behind. It was such a quandary. She slid into the room like a snake, silent, a darker shadow against the darkness of the day. It was only when I turned to throw Robert's letters on the fire, to remove all trace of our plan, that the flames leaped up, and it was their flare of light that illuminated my sister Anna's figure against the white wall. I jumped and spun around.
What are you doing here?
My greeting was not fond, but I was astonished to see her. After our mother's death, I had, to my shame, neglected Anna badly. Whilst my brothers had benefited from Robert's influence, Anthony, Anna, and their papist household had been left to make shift as best they could. Sometimes I had imagined Anna in her new manor house in the country, the house that Anthony had rebuilt in the ruins of Sawston Hall. I tried not to think of it, though, because Robert's violence on that night, when he had been thwarted in his capture of Queen Mary, still sickened me. It was far easier to try to forget it, and to pretend that Anthony and Anna did not exist.
Amy.
Anna came forward into the light. She looked old, worn, a ghost of our mother, or perhaps a diminished version of me. I had always been the prettier. I felt a sense of irritation. I could not see her now. I had too much to do. "Anna," I said. I tried to erase the annoyance from my voice. "You should have written."
I wanted to see you.
She came close to me, reached for my hands. Her faded blue eyes searched my face. I tried not to shrink from her. There was something at the same time vacant and intense in her expression that scared me.
I need to talk to you,
she said. Of course, I said, all the while thinking how ill-timed this was and how I might be rid of her.
But it's about Robert,
she said. This was sufficiently surprising that it silenced me. I stared at her, baffled, wondering if she was mad. Her jaw was set, and there was a determined glint in her eye now, and as I watched, her hand slid down protectively over her belly, in a gesture that made me feel a lurch of fear and sickness. For one mad moment, I thought that surely, Robert had not got her with child. The thought that my husband might have given my sister the child that he and I could not have repelled me utterly, more than any thought of him as the Queen's lover. Yet even as the suspicion started to form in my mind, I knew that it was false. Robert had not been faithful to me over the years, but he would never have looked twice at Anna. There was something else here, something more sinister and dangerous than a mere affair. The church clock Striking the hour reminded me that I had no time to waste on Anna, no matter her grievance. Richard Varney would be here soon, and I must vanish in the same moment. Any delay might spell disaster to my plan. Mrs. Owen, deaf as a post and indifferent to everything about her, was no threat. But Mrs. Oddingsells was also downstairs, and her sharp nose would twitch at any sign of trouble. I could only hope that Anna, like Richard, had entered by the back stair without being seen. "I can't talk now," I said. I gestured towards the trunk. "I'm going on a journey." It was as though she had not heard me. She sat down on the end of the bed. Her legs were so short that they did not touch the ground, and she swung them back and forth like a child. "I never told you that I met Robert at Sawston," she said. "Do you remember that year? The year King Edward died, and your husband tried to put the traitor Jane Grey on the throne." That myopic blue stare pinned me to the spot. "Anthony gave Queen Mary shelter, and for that Robert burned Sawston to the ground." My throat was suddenly dry. "I remember," I said. "I'm sorry for it, but—" I hesitated. "Anna, we were on opposing sides. It is the fortunes of war. Your husband got Mary to safety, and later he was rewarded for it." I waited, but she said nothing. "It was a long time ago," I said lamely, "and no one died. Time has passed. We have a different queen now. Surely all can be forgotten." "I have not forgotten," Anna said. "I never forgot." I hesitated. I did not know what else to say. "I had not realised you were at Sawston at the time," I said weakly. "I'm sorry. It must have been very distressing for you." A bitter smile touched Amy's mouth. No warmth in it. "The whole of Anthony's family was at Sawston that night. We were celebrating because I was expecting another child after 3 miscarriages. The babe was healthy, and I felt well. It was a miracle." Horror and confusion made my brain run slow. "But you have no children," I said stupidly. "You are childless like me." Anna's chin came up. "I am not like you, Amy," she said scornfully. "I conceived more than once, and then I lost my child when we were forced to flee in the panic and confusion of the fire. We were all terrified. I was running and I fell." Once again, her hand rested protectively over her belly. "I hated Robert for that," she added. Her conversational tone made the chilling words all the more shocking. "Every day I would pray that Queen Mary would execute him." "I'm sorry," I said. "I had no idea." I felt helpless. How could I appease her? How could I get rid of her before it was too late? My mind was running feverishly along the 2 parallel paths. How to calm Anna and send her away, and how to be ready for any moment Richard Varney might come. "Mother said you were not to be told," Anna said. She was not looking at me now, but gazing at a point far distant, a point in the past, I guessed, and yet still vivid and painful in the present. "She said that Robert would one day become a powerful man, and that it was in the interests of us all, whatever our creed, to put personal feelings aside and ally ourselves to him for the good of the family. She said I would have more children, and not to fret." I blinked. It was hard advice. Pragmatic, though, from a woman who was not only protective of her family, but who had also experienced a number of miscarriages herself. I remembered the unsentimental way in which Mother had sent me recipes for herbal medicines to try to help me conceive, and the unvarnished words that, if I did not, I would be a woman with nothing. No place. No influence.
It happened again,
Anna said.
over and over. I would conceive and lose the babe, and now the physician has told me I must not try again for fear it will kill me. Anthony tells me it does not matter. But it does.
She lifted her gaze to mine. Her face was drained of all animation, all spirit, except for the startling hatred I saw beneath the surface. It was that which kept her alive.
You blame Robert,
I said.
You think it is his fault that you have lost all your babes and your hope for the future.
She nodded.
I do. I do blame him. I always will. I lost the last child 2 weeks ago, and I can bear it no more. I had to tell you. You had to know.
I went down on my knees beside the bed and took her cold hands in mine, regardless of the shudder of revulsion that went through me. It was like grasping a corpse. Anna, I said, I am so very sorry. I know how hard it is to be childless. Her gaze snapped. You do not know what it is like to lose a child. I swallowed the hurt and the words that bubbled up. It was a different sorrow to fail to conceive. That grief was mine.
No, I do not,
I said carefully. And I do understand why you feel Robert is to blame for your misfortunes.
What can I do?
I shook her hands gently.
How can I help you?
I did not know what she wanted, and I did not want to be so crass as to offer money for a loss that could never be compensated.
What do you want of me?
I repeated. Her hands tightened cruelly on mine.
I want you to kill him,
she said. For a moment I was frozen into shock, and then I started to laugh. It was so unexpected that I could not help myself. The sound came bubbling up, and I could not prevent it bursting out. Anna let go of me as though I had the plague and leaped to her feet, leaving me kneeling there on the floor.
I'm sorry.
I scrambled up, trying to stifle my mirth.
It's the shock. I was so surprised.
She looked at me with loathing.
I might have known that you would not care,
she said.
I'm sorry,
I said again, sobering.
But to kill Robert? How could I possibly accomplish that? And why would I want to do so?
Not just for me, she said, turning away so that her expression was in shadow.
But for both of us. Surely you cannot bear the way he humiliates you. You are a laughingstock, Amy. Your name is synonymous with cuckoldry throughout the entire land.
It was unkind, but I had schooled myself to withstand far worse in the 10 years that I had been Robert's wife. All urge to laugh had flown now. I was acutely conscious that time was running out, and that I must simply get rid of her. You are crazed, I said coldly. Your mind has been turned by grief, and I am sorry for it. But I will not kill Robert. He may well prefer to spend his hours with the Queen than with me, but he provides well for me. I lack for nothing. I am unlikely to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. She came very close to me.
You lack for nothing but freedom and respect. Aye, I will give you that. And you also lack generosity and love. Your material comfort has been built on the blood of those that Robert has wronged.
I turned away, tired of her now. Time was running out. I thought I heard the sound of a latch lifting, a step on the stair below. It was time for me to go. I snapped the trunk closed and swung around, heading to the door. Go home, Anna, I said over my shoulder. Go back to Anthony and listen to him. He can comfort you. And if you are in material need, write to me and I will ask Robert to provide for you too. I knew that was a lie, but in that moment, I would have promised anything to be free of her. I should not have turned my back on her. I realised it too late. I had walked out of the room without a backward look at her, and paused at the top of the stair, expecting to see Richard Varney below. He was not there. No one was there. I heard the patter of Anna's running steps behind me. She grasped my sleeve, tugging on it, spinning me about. Her face was a mask of fury. "Do not walk away from me," she shouted, shaking my arm. "Do not turn your back on me and dismiss me like a servant." I was afraid that all the commotion would disturb Mrs. Oddingsells. I tried to free my sleeve from Amy's grasping fingers, but as I turned, I caught the heel of my slipper in my gown. Such a small thing. But my head spun, and I felt myself teeter dangerously on the top step. "Amy!" Anna's voice was loud in my ears. "Amy!" I lost my footing. I seemed to fall so slowly. I had so much time, and yet so little. I saw horror replace the anger in Anna's face. She screamed, her mouth wide with fear. A man came running. I recognised Richard Varney. Within the jumble of terror and despair that possessed me, I felt one last glimmer of hope. Richard could have saved me. It would have been a simple matter for him to step forward and catch me. Instead, he stepped aside. I had time to see his face, to see the calculation in his eyes, the satisfaction. And then I knew. Robert had double-crossed me. There had never been a plan where I would be free to start a new life. It would have been too much of a risk. Robert needed to make sure he was truly free. Richard did nothing to save me. He, like Anthony Foster, like William Hyde, like all the others, was Robert's man, bought and paid for. And Robert, of course, was the Queen's man. He had never been mine, not even in the beginning in Norfolk, when he had been young and in love. Elizabeth had always come first. His sun and stars, the centre of his world, his inspiration and his life. Hope died. I felt the rush of air against my face and the lightness of empty space beneath me. I felt fear screaming inside my head. Then it was over. Chapter 25. Lizzie, present day. I don't believe it. Lizzie sat in the kitchen at the High that evening, a cup of tea ignored at her side, and bit hard into an almond croissant. I don't believe it, she repeated with her mouth full. He can't just have been visiting the seaside or seeing a friend or whatever else he says he's been doing. It isn't possible. She remembered the conversation she'd had with Arthur about Johnny being in Peru or Scotland. It seemed that Arthur hadn't been far off the truth after all. I know it's annoying, Lizzie. Jules sounded irritatingly reasonable to Lizzie's ears. And it's thoughtless of him, and he's caused you a lot of trouble, but you said yourself that Johnny's just a boy, and he's been through a lot. I know. Lizzie cut her off shortly. Sorry, Jules. She saw her cousin's expression. You're right, of course. And I'm glad he's safe. Of course I am. It's just... She stopped. She couldn't articulate to Jules that it wasn't actually about the problems Johnny had caused her. It was simply that Johnny's reappearance, as sudden as his disappearance, felt incongruent and wrong. At first, when she had heard the news, she had felt nothing but relief. Johnny was home. He was safe. Arthur, when she had spoken to him, had sounded overjoyed, and that had made her even happier. It was only later, when the reality of Johnny's return had started to sink in, that Lizzie's feelings had also changed. For a start, she felt an utter fool. At what point had she and Arthur bought into some kind of shared delusion about Johnny's whereabouts? She was angry with Johnny, but mostly with herself, for doing exactly what she had accused the police of and building up a case that fitted her version of the facts. It had all been based on no more than conjecture and wild imagination, and it had led her into spinning some kind of supernatural explanation for something that was a great deal simpler. Johnny, grief-stricken and depressed, had wanted some time alone to deal with his feelings. He hadn't been on any kind of quest. She had imagined the whole thing. Lizzie felt so stupid, so gullible, and, in an odd way, it felt as though everything that had happened to move her life forward in the intervening 2 weeks had been cancelled out, and she was back where she had started. She'd thought all along that her dependence on psychometry was wrong and something to be ashamed of. Now she saw just how far it had misled her. She'd even started to believe that time travel was possible, because Johnny had somehow normalised her gift and encouraged her to believe. And then she had taken it way too far. Perhaps she had seen a vision in the stone when she had touched the stone of Baynard's castle, just as she saw visions from other objects. It didn't mean that she had actually been there, and nor had Johnny. Jules was still talking. So, there are gaps in the CCTV record, but there's no doubt he was seen in Oxford and various other places, just like he said, and one of his friends said they'd met up. So near, Lizzie thought, and yet so far. The police have checked it all out as far as they're able, Jules said, and Johnny's agreed to go for some counselling. Physically, he's fine, just a bit hungry. Johnny wants to meet up, Lizzie said. He asked me to go over to Oakhanger Hall today, but Arthur thought he'd better have a bit of time to settle back in first. He wants to apologise. I should think so, Jules said, sounding like a strict teacher. It's the least he can do for all the trouble he's caused you. I'll go over tomorrow, Lizzie said. She tried to shake off the sense of uneasiness she was feeling. 2 almond croissants and 3 mugs of sweet tea hadn't helped. Something felt out of kilter. She didn't know what. Perhaps it was simply that she didn't know where she and Arthur went from here. It had all been so intense, so wrapped up with what had happened to Johnny, that now that was all over, it felt as though her relationship with Arthur was finished too, before it had properly started. Her night with him, so emotional and right at the time, so much a part of the connection she had thought they had, now seemed almost incomprehensible for someone as guarded as she had always been. I'm going to bed, she said, getting up, and wishing the pastry and the misery together were not weighing so heavy on her stomach. Would you like me to come with you tomorrow? Jules asked. She looked suddenly anxious, and Lizzie felt a rush of affection for her. She went over and hugged her cousin. I'll be fine, she said. You've done so much already. You're the best. I'll come and see all of you soon, and we can get together in London as well, and I'll treat you to the Mayfair chocolate tour as a thank you. The kids will love that, Jules said. Me too, Lizzie admitted. After Jules had gone, she went upstairs and took a long, hot shower. It did nothing to banish the shadows that clung to the edges of her mind like cobwebs. She realised that she would need to hire a car to get to Oakhanger Hall. It felt good to grasp some sort of practical plan, rather than let her mind meander through all the puzzles and confusion. So she turned out all of her bags, looking for her driving licence, eventually finding it in the pocket of one of her jackets. She put it on the bedside table so she wouldn't forget it in the morning, and in doing so, she caught a flash of silver illuminated in the lamp's glow. She stooped to pick it up. It was a thin, silver chain, with a little silver phoenix symbol dangling from it. She remembered seeing it in the Land Rover when Arthur had given her a lift home. It had hung from the driving mirror, sparkling in the light. Turning it over in her hand, Lizzie saw the initials J.G. engraved on the reverse. The chain had snapped. She touched the misshapen links. Immediately, her mind clouded with images, blurred by sun and water droplets, and a sort of dizziness that filled her up and made her feel languid and warm and slow. She could hear loud music and laughter, but it was eclipsed by the roaring of water in her ears. Panic and fear edged out the warmth in her mind, like a cloud across the sun, but it was too late to start fighting, too late for the struggle. She burst through the surface and heard the sound of screaming, and Dudley's name. And then the water closed over her head again, and it was easier to let it take her, to sink beneath the surface, where it was gentle and dark. She came to herself kneeling on the floor, gasping and retching, as though her lungs were full of water. In the palm of her hand it felt as though the phoenix burned against the scar. She dropped it sharply, and it clattered against the base of the cabinet. When she got her breath back, Lizzie hoisted herself up onto the bed and sat there for a little, waiting for her spinning thoughts to settle. The phoenix charm had belonged to Jenna, Arthur's fiancée. She had known that, felt it as soon as she had touched the silver links. But if the phoenix had been Jenna's, then the watery plunge and the hideous death by drowning were also hers. And Dudley had been there at the time, too. She hugged herself close. She was sure that Kat had told her that Jenna had died from anorexia, so perhaps the vision had been wrong. Yet it had felt so vivid, exactly like Amelia's fall had. Lizzie remembered the story of Amy Robsart's spirit being trapped in the waters of the citrine pool, that descent into darkness, the binding of her soul. There were so many parallels and so many echoes. Could they really be no more than coincidence, and Johnny's disappearance had no link to it at all? There had been his notebook, full of the ancestry of the Robsart family, and his research into Amy, Robert, and Elizabeth. He had even checked out stone tape theory, and she was certain that at Baynard's castle he had been testing her gift, to see if she could connect with the memory of stone. She remembered Avery's words.
Truth is so often a matter of perception. It is very easy to be misdirected, especially if we want to be.
Supposing Johnny was misdirecting them about where he had been. Arthur in particular would want to accept Johnny's words at face value, because the only thing he cared about was having his brother safely home. Johnny knew that Arthur was not comfortable with the supernatural, and would be inclined to believe him when he said he had just wanted time alone to think. Lizzie was not so sure, though. She was also not sure that Johnny had given up his hope of saving Amy and changing Amelia's fate. Her phone rang. To her surprise, she saw it was Dudley. She almost let it go to voicemail, but, in the end, she decided to answer. At the very least, she could ask Dudley for the details of what had happened at Oakhanger Hall, the day that Johnny and Amelia were playing their disappearing tricks.
Lizzie!
He sounded so pleased to speak to her that Lizzie felt slightly sick.
Hey, how are you? The police told me Johnny's turned up. Hopefully, they'll drop the investigation into Millie's death, and then we can unfreeze her and get on with our lives. I can't wait.
There were voices in the background, and the clink of bottles. Lizzie realised that Dudley was drunk. It sounded like a big party, and she was suddenly fiercely glad she was nowhere near it. I can imagine, Lizzie said. Did you want anything in particular, Dudley?
Just to find out when you're coming back to London, Dudley said a little plaintively. It's boring here without you.
But you've got Letty to play with now, Lizzie said. I heard she'd moved in with you.
Oh, Letty.
Dudley sounded vague, as though he'd already forgotten.
Yeah, well, she's no fun to be around. She's sick all the time. I hear that can happen when you're pregnant, Lizzie said coldly. You should be supporting her, Dudley. Surely it's the least you can do. Whatever. Dudley sounded sulky now. I'd rather see you, Lizzie. You were always more fun. His tone lifted. You're coming back, right? I've got a few things to sort out, Lizzie said briskly. She knew that even if she did go back to London, it would never be to the same world, least of all to hang out again with Dudley. Listen, Dudley, she said, wanting to capture him whilst he was still in the good mood phase. Can you just remind me of something? We were talking a while ago about the time you were at Oakhanger with Johnny and Amelia. Little shit, Dudley said randomly, suddenly vehement. And you said something about him being an emo kid, saying weird stuff and always appearing and disappearing like a ghost, Lizzie said. She wondered suddenly if the police were tapping Dudley's phone, or hers for that matter. Well, they could make of this what they wanted. Yeah. She could tell Dudley's attention was slipping away. What did you mean? Lizzie said. About the appearing and the disappearing? Fuck, Lizzie, how should I know? Dudley said. I can't remember last week. Never mind something that happened years ago at Oakhanger. Lizzie was used to this. She waited, and after a moment, Dudley sighed heavily. All I remember, he said, was that Johnny came to visit us for a weekend at Oakhanger a few months after Amelia and I were married. School holidays or something. It was fucking awful, if you want the truth. He was about 11 and into stuff like history and religion, and Amelia said I had to spend time with him, so I tried. I really did. We played football together, but he was useless, and there was nothing to talk about, you know. And then I'd turn around, and he just vanished like I was the most boring person in the world. I was really mad. Amelia and I rowed about it after it happened a second time, and I told her he was weird. You mean he walked out whilst you were talking? Lizzie said. Her mouth was suddenly dry. Nah, Dudley said. He literally disappeared. I mean, he must have slipped out when my back was turned, but it was like he just vanished. That was why I said he was like a ghost. Fucking weird kid. Right, Lizzie said. They're all bad news, Dudley said. Anna's nearly as bad. I'm sure I saw her that day at Oakhanger when Amelia... He stopped. When Amelia what? Lizzie said. Nothing, Dudley said. He sounded frightened suddenly. I don't know. I haven't seen Anna. I'm confused. Lizzie had never been able to read Dudley's mind in her entire life, but she knew that in that moment he had been about to say, when Amelia died. A whisper of fear crept down her spine. She felt colder than she ever had before. Had Dudley been at Oakhanger that day? Had Anna? Whatever had happened, she knew she'd get no sense from him now. Dudley would admit nothing. She could hear the roar of the party behind him, and the sound of Dudley's breathing, and the moment hung on a knife's edge. You take care, Dudley, Lizzie said carefully. I've got to go now. She cut the connection and dropped the phone on the bed. Then she sat down next to it, took the little silver phoenix charm in her hand, and tried to work out what she had to do. Lizzie drove slowly through Oakhanger village, mindful of both the twistiness of the road and her unfamiliarity with the car. She was glad she hadn't fallen for the salesgirl's talk and hired herself something flashier. She liked sports cars, but they weren't great on country roads, and she hadn't driven for years. It had been scary enough simply getting from the hire company in Whitney to Oakhanger, 12 miles away. Oakhanger village was pretty, but not in the chocolate box way Lizzie had come to expect from further west in the Cotswolds. The stone was greyer here, and the buildings looked colder and more austere than the honey-gold cottages of Burford. Even though the sun was shining, and the day was tranquil and warm, Lizzie felt chilled.
but that was hardly surprising. The anticipation of what she was about to do was like ice in her blood. She took a left turn by the Barley Mow pub, passing a high wall. Ahead of her, the lane opened up to a parking area beside a stone arch in the wall. All Saints' Church was carved at the top of the wooden notice board. An uneven, flagged path led to the church door. On impulse, Lizzie stopped the car and got out to read the plaque by the gate. It was exactly as Avery had told her. The information board stated that both All Saints' Church and Oakhanger Hall had been extensively rebuilt by Lord Basing in the early 19th century, using stone from his ruined manor at Cumnor, a few miles away. The archway to the left of the plaque had come from the chapel at Cumnor Hall. A carved stone angel with luxuriant wings clasping a harp looked down on Lizzie benignly. Lizzie got back in the car and turned right, following the lane towards some huge metal gates that were firmly closed. The name Oakhanger Hall was picked out in gold on a black wrought iron nameplate. Lizzie didn't really remember any of this from the last time she had been there for Dudley and Amelia's wedding. She'd had a car and a driver that day, and she'd spent the journey listening to her latest album on headphones. She smiled a little wryly at the memory. She got out and pressed the bell. She'd expected there to be the usual crowd of journalists about, but perhaps news of Johnny's return hadn't yet got out. The intercom on the gate crackled, but there was no response. A second later, however, the gates swung open silently, and she drove through, and they shut behind her. Lizzie had the oddest sensation of a trap closing. She'd always been a bit claustrophobic, wary of being penned in. A short drive led to the house. She sat for a moment, looking at it, before she put the car into gear. Her main feeling was surprise. She'd forgotten how ugly it was, with its pointed window arches, spiral chimneys, and quaint little turrets. Amelia had clearly done some more work on it in the years since the wedding. Large windows created a wall of glass on the west side of the courtyard, and the stables were clearly new, but in a style that copied but did not quite pull off the character of the original. It was all a bit too much for Lizzie, a mad mixture that shouted, "Look at me." She pulled up in front of the main entrance. 4 grotesque carved faces, a lot less friendly than the stone angel at the church, adorned the door embrasure and did nothing to make her feel welcome. She felt spiky and unsettled enough to make her almost turn tail and run. "Hi." Arthur was waiting for her. His smile was warm, and it made Lizzie feel a little bit sick in anticipation of what she was about to do. She'd lain awake a long time the previous night, trying to decide whether to tell Arthur what she knew, but in the end had decided against it. It was Johnny she needed to talk to, not Arthur. Johnny held the key to the mystery. "Thanks for coming," Arthur said. He kissed her, and for one long moment Lizzie closed her eyes and blotted out what was to come, and let the warmth and the pleasure of it unfurl in her. "Hey," Arthur said softly when he let her go. "It's good to see you." He drew her into the hall. "Come and meet Sam. Anna's here too," he added. He saw Lizzie's quick glance. "It's okay." He touched her arm briefly, a fleeting reassurance. "She's just so glad to have Johnny back that I'm sure she won't cause any trouble." The hall was even more grotesque than the outside of the house. Lizzie remembered the huge stone Gothic vaulting and stained glass windows. She glanced towards the staircase. "Was that where Amelia fell?" she asked. "No." Arthur gave her a faint smile. "Amelia's accident happened on the back stairs." Lizzie was relieved to find that the kitchen was brand new, light, and much more normal. Anna and an older man whom she assumed must be Sam Appleyard were sitting at the striped pine table, which was littered with newspapers and empty mugs. The air smelled warmly of baked bread and coffee. Sam got to his feet and came around the table to shake Lizzie formally by the hand.
Hi, I'm Sam. We're grateful to you for coming over.
He had short salt and pepper hair and a deeply tanned and lined face. His accent was US West Coast, and his grip firm. He gave Lizzie an impression of durability that she thought was probably an essential quality for someone who disappeared off into the wilds for months at a time. His manner was gruff, but she liked him. Lizzie nodded to Anna, who gave a dip of the head in acknowledgement. She looked younger now, and more vulnerable than she had when she had marched into Lizzie's flat, bristling with suspicion and aggression, but not much friendlier.
Take a seat.
Sam waved Lizzie to an empty chair next to Anna, who rather ostentatiously moved further away.
Would you care for a cup of coffee?
Thanks, Lizzie said. Sam placed a mug of coffee in front of her, and Arthur pushed the biscuit tin across the table towards her. She cupped her hands about the mug and inhaled the scent.
Hey, Lizzie.
The door opened, and Johnny ambled in. He looked just the same, lanky, cadaverous, his blue eyes tired. He seemed to vibrate with the same repressed energy Lizzie had sensed in him from the night he'd come to the flat. He kissed her cheek.
Thanks for coming,
he said.
I don't deserve it, but I really appreciate it.
You owe her an apology,
Anna said grudgingly.
We all thought she'd pushed you in the river or something.
Yeah.
Johnny's gaze slid away from Lizzie's, and he blushed.
I'm really, really sorry about that.
He held the door open.
Can we talk?
He looked pointedly at the others.
In private?
I don't think that would be a good idea,
Arthur said.
Lizzie might not want that after you abandoned her on the embankment.
Johnny's blush deepened.
I've said I'm sorry,
he mumbled. Lizzie almost pitied him. She would have done if she hadn't been expecting this, hadn't suspected that Johnny would try to get her on her own again so that he could exploit her ability to read the memory of stone like he had at Baynard's castle.
It's okay, she said. It'll be fine.
Her nerves were strung so tightly that she could feel herself shaking. She grabbed her coffee and a couple of biscuits and followed Johnny out. This house is a warren, she said as they recrossed the hall. I couldn't live somewhere like this. I'd rattle around like a marble. She tried to sound as normal as she could. She didn't want to confront Johnny until she was absolutely sure of what he had planned.
It's so weird that it's mine now,
Johnny said.
Did Arthur tell you? Millie left it to me. I can't decide.
He let the sentence hang. Where are we going? Lizzie was trying not to spill her coffee on the carpet. She was trembling so much, she suspected she was leaving a trail of biscuit crumbs like Hansel and Gretel. Johnny didn't seem to have noticed, fortunately. He was concentrating only on what he needed to do. Lizzie felt a burst of compassion for him. He was so intense, so driven to save Amelia. There was no room in his mind for anything else.
I thought we'd go to my room,
Johnny said.
There's something I want to show you, to try to explain.
The sentence trailed away as he started to climb the grand stair, slowing his loping stride to match Lizzie's shorter one. The steps were broad and shallow, and at the top the landing spread out on either side like a huge gallery. The light was multicoloured, refracted through the panes of the stained glass windows. Lizzie paused, remembering her vision of Johnny standing there as a child on the day of Dudley and Amelia's wedding, peering through the mahogany banisters. It felt as though the shadow of Oakhanger Hall hung over everything, including Avery, who had warned her not to go back.
This way,
Johnny called, and Lizzie hurried after him, down a side corridor. It felt colder here, even less friendly than in the gallery. Lizzie's skin prickled a warning. She was so attuned to the house now, to its moods and its memories, that it almost felt as though she could hear it breathing. Its presence wrapped about her, cold and claustrophobic. Johnny was waiting for her at the end of the passage. They ducked beneath a low arch that was decorated with another of the Oakhanger's stone angels, went down a couple of steps, and suddenly they were on a small landing. It was diamond-shaped, with mullioned windows, and the ubiquitous stone angel over the arch at the top of a narrow flight of stone stairs. She felt the atmosphere as soon as she stepped through the door. It felt close, stifling, a blanket of grief and misery. The sensation was so strong and repellent that she took an instinctive step back, bumping clumsily into Johnny, missing her step and dropping the coffee mug. It smashed on the flagstones, splashing everywhere, but Johnny didn't seem to notice. He caught her arm and steadied her.
"I like this part of the house," he said. "It feels very close to the past."
He smiled at Lizzie.
"Don't worry. It can't hurt you. It's only the memory in the stone. I think it holds all of Amy Robsart's grief and regret. And that's what you're feeling."
He ran a gentle hand over the smooth plaster of the wall.
"This part of the house reuses the stone from Cumnor Place. Its very fabric is created from the place where Amy Robsart died." "I know,"
Lizzie said. Her voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat.
"Johnny," she said. "Johnny, this is the flight of stairs where Amelia died."
Johnny was staring down into the shadows of the stair well below.
"Just a little step back in time,"
he said, almost to himself. "No," Lizzie said. Her head was buzzing with dark shapes and patterns. She wanted to run away. "Johnny, you can't bring Amelia back," she said. "I understand what you're trying to do, but time doesn't work like that. It can't."
"I've got to save Amelia,"
Johnny said, as though he hadn't heard her.
"I couldn't save Amy. She wouldn't listen. You have to help me."
He turned to Lizzie, and the suddenness, the urgency made her draw back.
He looked heartbreakingly young and hopeful. "I knew you would work it all out," he said. "I knew you were different. I need you to call up the memories in the stone like you did at Baynard's Castle. Then I can cross time."
"No," Lizzie said. "I won't do it." She tried to back away from the top of the steps, but the swarm of dark shadows in her mind was clamouring for attention. There was something here that was too powerful for her to contain, and it was terrifying. It was so strong that it dominated everything, filling all the spaces in her head. She fought to hold on to her own thoughts, so that she would not be completely subsumed. Dizzily, she put out a hand to steady herself against the wall, only realising, when the touch of the cold plaster seemed to burn her palm, that it was the last thing she should have done. The memories in the stone had been set free. The images were coming thick and fast now, like a jerky silent film. The figures jostling on the screen. Lizzie couldn't breathe. She was drowning in sorrow. Her lungs were full of it. She could taste it in her mouth. Images spun through her mind, animated with sound as well as movement now.
"It's not Amy," she said. "It's not Amy whose grief we can feel here. Amy had hopes and plans. She was excited, happy. She was going to escape and start anew."
She took a deep breath.
"There's someone else here," she said. "Amy calls her Anna. It's Anna whose grief we can sense. Anna who is broken with guilt. She never meant for it to happen. She did not want Amy to fall. It was an accident." The images shifted abruptly, and Lizzie saw not Amy Robsart, but Amelia, in one of her long, flowing dresses, her blonde hair loose about her shoulders, standing at the top of the stone stair, suitcases scattered about her,
She was looking back at someone, and she was smiling. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was edged with impatience and spite. Lizzie could feel Amelia's emotions, the irritation and the exasperation. Amelia wanted to get away, and someone was calling her back. "Anna, no!" It was Johnny's voice, and the shout was so loud that it broke Lizzie from the trance. She opened her eyes, saw the dark stairs yawning below her, and teetered on the edge for one sickening moment. She waited for the push in the small of the back, the fall, the rush of air, and the clutch of terror, everything she had felt in her visions, the fate that had lain in wait for Amy Robsart and for Amelia, and now for her. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a hand raised and instinctively put up an arm to protect herself. The blow glanced off her shoulder, giving her a momentary, excruciating pain, and Lizzie stumbled back, jarring her arm again as she fell clumsily. She lay still for a moment, with her cheek pressed against the cold stone of the floor, whilst the darkness swirled through her mind and started to clear, and the pain receded. Far away, as though in a dream, she heard the splintering crash of stone. "Anna," Johnny said again, and there was a whole world of despair in his voice. "It was you. You killed Amelia." Pushing herself upright, Lizzie saw Anna Robsart, and behind her, Arthur, who was breathing as though he had run a mile. His eyes met Lizzie's, and she saw the moment he realised what had happened. She saw the horror swamp him, and felt his despair. Arthur turned away, and Lizzie felt the link between them shut down. Far below them, on the turn of the stair, the stone angel lay smashed into shards, just as the gazing ball had done so many years before. Chapter 26. Lizzie, present day.
"Yes, I did it,"
Anna said.
"I pushed Amelia down the stairs."
They were back in the kitchen, amidst the breakfast debris. There was an air of complete unreality about everything. The papers, the cold pot of tea, felt like a relic from another time, from before. Arthur had his arm around Johnny. They both looked completely ashen. Lizzie felt like an interloper. She wanted to reach out to Arthur, to try to comfort him, but she knew there was nothing she could say. There was no comfort anyone could give. Anna's blonde hair fell across her face like a curtain, sheltering her expression from view.
"I killed Millie,"
she repeated.
"We were arguing about the divorce. I wanted Millie to take Dudley for all he had. It was the least he owed her after the way he'd behaved."
She shot Lizzie a look.
But Millie wasn't interested. She was running away, planning a new life. She was all excited and glowing and happy, and
Her voice cracked.
I was still so full of anger and resentment and hate. I couldn't understand why she would let Dudley off the hook like that. I told her I thought she was weak and stupid, and she looked at me with pity.
She clutched convulsively at the mug, wrapping her hands about it, searching for fading warmth.
Pity from Millie, of all people. I couldn't stand it. She was the one who broke down when Mum died. I was strong. I hid how I was feeling to be there for everyone else. I didn't deserve to be patronised like that.
She gulped down a mouthful of cold tea.
Well, I told her that if she wouldn't do it for herself, then at least she should make Dudley pay for what he did to Mum.
She looked defiantly and deliberately from face to face.
Basically, Dudley killed Mum,
she said.
When he refused to pay for her cancer treatment, he condemned her to death. He had so much cash in those days he wouldn't even have noticed, but he wouldn't do it. And Amelia was complicit in that because she could have made him pay for Mum to go to America for treatment, but she just gave up. When he refused, She let him get away with it.
Anna.
Sam shifted in his seat, placing one of his hands over hers.
We talked about this at the time,
he said. He sounded lost, despairing.
We all thought you agreed the treatment would have made no difference. Jessica said so herself. It was too late.
You can't know that.
Anna was shaking now. Lizzie could see how thin was the veneer of her self-control.
How could anyone know? You could at least have tried.
Her voice splintered on the last word, and she started to sob in great gulps and gasps, her whole face contorted and her shoulders heaving with the weight of grief and anger.
Amelia said she understood why I was still angry, but that I had to let it go. That I had to let Mum go.
Anna said. She raised her chin.
She said she had moved on with her life and that I should too. But I couldn't.
Her voice shredded into despair.
I didn't want to. Millie was bustling about, packing her bags all the time we were talking, like I was just an irritant to be brushed away. I snapped, I suppose. When she carried the first bags over to the top of the stairs, I followed her and said she couldn't just walk out in the middle of our discussion. She laughed and said the discussion was over, and I grabbed her arm and screamed at her not to turn her back on me. And then...
She stared.
I pushed her. I was so angry I wanted to kill her. She fell down the first flight and hit her head on the wall. I heard the crack. And then she sort of rolled over and fell down the second flight too.
No one said anything at all. Johnny was slumped against Arthur's shoulder, eyes closed. Arthur looked ashen. A muscle moved in his cheek. After a second, Sam got clumsily to his feet, the scrape of his chair shockingly loud in the quiet. He put his arms about Anna. She did not move into his embrace, but neither did she push him away.
It will all be all right,
Sam said, and he sounded as though he was trying to convince himself.
We have to go to the police, Anna. Do you understand that? We'll tell them it was an accident. It'll be all right.
Lizzie was reminded of Anna comforting Johnny that day at her flat. Because how did you ever make anything right when it was so wrong, so messed up, so painful? She had no idea.
I don't want you to tell them it was an accident.
Anna pulled herself free of Sam's grip. She raised her chin, staring him down defiantly.
I've told you I did it. I don't mind admitting why. I want everyone to see what a conniving cow Amelia was and what an utter sleaze Dudley is and always will be.
Sam was looking shattered, old and exhausted.
What has Dudley got to do with this?
He said.
It's all about Dudley in the end,
Anna said bitterly.
It always was about him. Selfish, self-centered, stupid, feckless Dudley. No one could resist him, could they? Not Amelia. Not Letty Knowles. Not even me.
She glanced up for a moment, her blue eyes dull.
To think that in the beginning I thought Dudley was God's gift. I practically begged for his attention.
She shook her head violently.
I hate him. I hate myself.
Lizzie remembered the wedding, and how both Letty and Anna had been part of the screaming, giggling pack of girls fawning over Dudley in the pool that afternoon. Anna had been so young then, 16, younger than Amelia, her sister, Dudley's bride. But evidently that hadn't stopped him. She felt sick.
I saw Dudley when I was leaving that day Amelia fell,
Anna said.
I was in such a horrible state I didn't stop to speak to him. and I don't think he saw me. I don't know what he was doing here, but later, when he pretended that he'd been miles away and he didn't know anything about it, I knew he was lying. I think he'd come to talk to Millie about the divorce and got the wind up when he realised she was dead.
And what about Lizzie? Arthur's voice was hard. He didn't look at Lizzie, but kept his full attention on Anna. You hit her. You could have killed her too.
I didn't mean to,
Anna said.
I thought she was going to pull one of her weird mind tricks and tell Johnny what had happened. I just wanted to stop her.
Despite the words, the glance she shot Lizzie was laced with malice.
You kept causing me problems, she said to her. I wanted to keep Johnny away from you, but he liked you, and so did Arthur.
She shook her head.
You're as bad as Dudley in your own way. I really wish I could have pinned the whole thing on the two of you. I tried, when I gave Johnny a lift to yours that night in Arthur's car and he left his phone behind. I planted it in your flat, but it wasn't enough.
Lizzie looked at her. Anna met her eyes defiantly, but behind the bluster and bravado, Lizzie could see another Anna Robsart, the one who had hidden her grief when her mother had died, whilst her hatred and resentment festered because she thought no one cared enough. No one had done enough to save her. She saw the Anna who loved Johnny fiercely and had tried to comfort him, and the girl who had never meant to kill her sister, but had lost her temper because, as Arthur had once said, she sometimes went way too far.
I truly didn't mean it to happen,
Anna said, and in that moment she crumbled, and her voice shook, and Sam gave a muttered curse and got up to pull her into another clumsy hug. Lizzie stood up as quietly as she could. She wanted to slip away, unwilling to spectate on this family tragedy any more. It felt horrible and intrusive. She knew the police would want to question her, but that could wait. She already knew she wouldn't press charges against Anna. The whole hideous mess would hardly be helped if she did. As it was, Anna would have to live with what she had done for the rest of her life. Arthur looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. But he said nothing. Nothing at all. And Lizzie turned and walked away, out into the daylight that felt like another world. Back at the High, Lizzie found both Jules and Avery waiting. She took one look at them and burst into tears.
I'll run you a bath,
Jules said. She couldn't deal with tears. It was left to Avery to enfold Lizzie in her arms and soothe her like a child while she poured out the whole story.
Is it over now?
Lizzie finally pulled away from Avery, pushed the hair back from her hot face, and wiped her eyes.
It has to be over, because otherwise how can it have been worth it?
Avery, her face full of sorrow, stroked Lizzie's hair just like her grandmother had done when she was a child.
I don't know,
she said regretfully.
I hope so.
Later, Arthur rang. The police had come, he said, and Anna had broken down completely. He and Johnny were bearing up as well as they could. They both wanted to see her, but in a little while, when Johnny was stronger.
Anytime,
Lizzie said. She could barely breathe. It felt as though there was so much she wanted to say.
Come anytime.
A fortnight went by. Lizzie went to the local art class. She was worse than even she had anticipated, utterly unable to draw anything recognisable, though she had better success with abstract painting. No one seemed to care, though. They were just pleased she was there, which she found rather nice. She went to yoga, which wasn't at all like the class at her London studio, but was absolutely fine all the same. She found a piano tuner and a gardener, neither of whom posted photos of her on social media. Avery suggested that she should get some exercise by walking a dog for the Blue Cross shelter nearby.
Lizzie chose a miniature spaniel with sad eyes called Perry, whose previous owners had had to give him up when they had twins. 2 days later, Perry moved into the High. The two of them got into a routine of sorts. Lizzie found it soothing. And then, one afternoon, Arthur was there. Lizzie was playing with Perry in the garden when the dog gave a tiny yip and barreled over to the gate, where he then sat, tail wagging in the leaves, begging for attention.
"Your dog is very well trained,"
Arthur said. He let himself in, bending to stroke Perry's velvety head. The dog promptly rolled over, begging for his stomach to be tickled. Arthur straightened.
"I never imagined you as a dog person," he said.
"I grew up with dogs," Lizzie said. Her throat was dry, her heart beating fast. "At least when I was staying with Jules's family." She felt a pang of nostalgia. "I wanted a dog when I moved to London," she said, "but I was too busy. It wouldn't have been fair."
"You could have got your assistant to look after it," Arthur said, "or found one that fitted into a handbag."
"Kat doesn't like dogs," Lizzie said. "The clue is in her name." She smiled at Perry. "Besides, if I have a pet, I want to look after it myself. Otherwise, what's the point? He's not just an accessory." She raised her gaze to Arthur and sighed. They could carry on talking about dogs forever, or they could be brave. "Would you like to come in?" she asked. "There's some coffee, or lemonade. Avery makes it for me." Arthur followed her over to the terrace and into the kitchen, Perry trotting along behind.
"You seem settled here," he said.
There was a question in his voice. "It's early days," Lizzie said, "but I think I may be." She gestured him to a chair and poured lemonade from the painted jug. Her hand shook a little, spilling drops of liquid onto the table. "Arthur," she said, but she didn't know how to continue, what to say.
"I thought you'd like to know how Johnny's getting on,"
Arthur said. He sounded distant. Lizzie's heart ached. "Yes," she said. "Please. I hope he's doing okay."
"He's pretty subdued," Arthur said. "But he's back at school, and he's seeing a counsellor, and I think he'll be fine in a while."
He stretched his legs out, sitting back.
"He wanted to come with me today, actually, but I told him I needed to talk to you alone first. He says he's got a lot of explaining to do, and he hopes you'll forgive him. He really means it this time."
"Right," Lizzie said. She scrubbed at the spilt juice, avoiding his gaze.
"Lizzie," Arthur said, "it's not your fault. Johnny took advantage of all of us in different ways because he was so obsessed with breaking the pattern and bringing Amelia back. There was no space in his life for anything else. And the truth of what Anna did would have come out even without your involvement. None of this is your fault."
"I know," Lizzie said. She swallowed hard. "I know that really. It's just..." She took a breath. "I feel as though my actions shattered what was left of your family," she confessed, "even though I never intended it." When Arthur didn't deny it or reassure her, she felt a little bit sick. She wanted to tell him how sorry she was that they had barely started to know each other, and now they were strangers again. She wanted to ask if they could try again, but that sounded both needy and selfish, and she shied away. "How is Anna?" she asked instead. Arthur grimaced. He took a mouthful of the lemonade.
"They've charged Anna with manslaughter,"
he said evenly. He moved his glass in slow circles of the table.
"A defense team think they can get her off, though, by explaining how affected she was by Jessica's death. They're calling Amelia's fall an accident that happened in the heat of the moment.
For a moment, he was very still. Then he sighed.
I'm not sure Anna wants to be found innocent, though. She's broken down completely.
I'm very sorry, Lizzie said. Your family had already gone through so much, she said. It feels almost unbearable. Except, of course, somehow you have to bear it.
We'll get through it, Arthur said. We're strong enough. It's better to know the truth anyway. Like I said, secrets have a way of coming out in the end.
Yes. Lizzie's heart sank as she remembered the last secret of them all. She went over to the dresser, sliding open the drawer, and taking out the little silver phoenix that had hung on the driving mirror in Arthur's car.
I have something of yours that I need to give back, she said. I found it in my bedroom. I think it must have fallen on the floor of your car when the chain broke and somehow got snagged on my coat.
Arthur was very still. He didn't take it from her outstretched hand, so after a moment, she put it on the table.
It had the initials J.G. in it, Lizzie said. I guessed it had belonged to Jenna. Your Jenna.
I didn't realize I'd lost it,
Arthur said. He cleared his throat.
I kept it in the car like a little talisman. It was just a stupid small thing, a present I gave Jenna when we got engaged. The phoenix is supposed to signify endurance and eternal life. I was into all that spiritual stuff at the time, and I thought it was a nice way to show I'd love her forever, without sounding too sentimental about it.
He looked at Lizzie.
You read it, didn't you? He said. You read its history.
I didn't do it deliberately, Lizzie said. I wish I hadn't. But you know how this works. I have no warning. Sometimes I see things and sometimes I don't. It's fickle, this gift. It's one of the reasons I don't like it. I didn't want to read the talisman. She stopped. It felt private, she said. I didn't want to know.
Arthur was silent. She couldn't tell what he was thinking. When it came to reading Arthur, it only worked when he wanted her to do it. She thought it was only fair that he should be able to deny her that insight, but his reserve, his impenetrability, made this doubly difficult. She couldn't leave it unsaid, though. She was committed now. This was the last secret between them, and it had to be laid to rest, no matter what happened afterwards.
I always wondered why you hated Dudley so much, she said slowly. I sensed it in you from the very first. I knew you disliked me, and I thought that was because you believed I was having an affair with Dudley. But you hated Dudley even more. I thought it was because of what had happened to Amelia. That was a part of it, of course, but it wasn't the real reason. The real reason was Jenna.
She waited, but Arthur said nothing. Still, she could not read any of his emotions. That door was slammed in her face, but she could feel the tension coming off him like static. Avery said that there were 3 other cases she knew of that mirrored in some way Amy Robsart's death, Lizzie said. There was Amethyst Green, the serving maid at Oakhanger, and there was Amias Latimer, the clerk in Oxford. There was Amelia, of course, but there was a 4th, someone called Mia.
Mia was Jenna's real name,
Arthur said. His voice sounded dull.
Yes,
Lizzie said.
I didn't work it out straight away because of the names. But, of course, Jenna Gascoigne was her stage name. Her real name was Mia Roberts. She took a gulp of the lemonade. It felt cool and sweet, soothing.
Avery told me that Jenna couldn't cope with the pressures that came with her work, Lizzie said. You told me yourself that she was messed up, and you did everything you could to help and support her. Everyone says the same, that Jenna developed anorexia and her life spiraled into depression and drug-taking and she died. What the reports don't say, she cleared her throat. What I saw when I touched the Phoenix was that Jenna had been partying with Dudley's band, with Callback Summer, just before she died. It was Dudley who gave her the drugs, and was too pissed to save her when she fell in the swimming pool at Oakhanger. It was an accident, but in so many ways he was culpable all the same. Arthur stirred at last. The band's management hushed it up because it would have been too damaging, he said. His voice was rough. It would have finished them. I only found out 2 years ago. Millie told me. She said Dudley had let slip one night that Jenna had died in the pool at Oakhanger. Millie had been away at the time because it was whilst Jessica was ill. She badgered the whole story out of him. Arthur ran a hand through his hair. It was the beginning of the end for them, really. I don't think Millie ever thought Dudley was faithful to her, but the thought of him getting high with her brother's fiancée whilst she was away with her dying mother... His face twisted. It was pretty horrific. It sounded like some mad orgy of drink and drugs, and by the end of it, Jenna was dead. And everything was a god-forsaken mess. He looked at Lizzie properly for the first time. I guess Dudley never told you. Dudley never said a word to me, Lizzie said. If he had, do you think I would have hidden it from you? I don't know, Arthur said. He sounded tired. After all, I hid it from you. I could have told you, but I didn't. Lizzie swallowed the hurt. Of course Arthur had hidden it from her. It had been devastating, shattering his life. And she had been Dudley's friend. Arthur would never have confided. Arthur shifted slightly, angling his body towards her. I loved Jenna, he said. Properly loved her, I mean. Yes, we were young, and it might have all gone wrong in time, but to me, at that time, it felt real and mature and more important than anything. Lizzie nodded. I can't say I understand, she said, because I've never experienced that sort of first love. I've always protected myself against feeling too much. But I understand that it could be like that for you. What hurt the most when I found out, Arthur said after a moment, was realizing that Jenna hadn't felt the same about me as I did about her. When I heard about the party, that she'd been sleeping with Dudley. He shook his head. I'd been so grief-stricken when she died that it felt as though I'd never known her. It felt like such a betrayal. It almost killed me. Perhaps Jenna did love you as much as you loved her, Lizzie said. We all make mistakes, Arthur, and we can all be self-destructive when we're unhappy. Arthur looked up. He gave her his heart-shaking smile, and for the first time, Lizzie felt a shred of warmth. That's a very generous thing to say, he said. And I think I've come to terms with it now, but... He shrugged. For the last couple of years, since I found out, it just about ate me up. His gaze focused on her, sudden and intent. When I met you, I could see it happening all over again, he said. Another crazy, mixed-up girl. He gave her a wry smile, whom I really, really liked, and wished I didn't. Lizzie's heart stuttered, and then started to race.
You said you knew I disliked you, Arthur said. That was the least of it. I knew there was a connection between us, but I didn't want to get involved with you. Why would I? You were Dudley's friend. Maybe more than just a friend. And I'd already lost 2 people I loved as a result of Dudley's selfishness. He was never directly culpable, and yet it always comes back to him in some way. So I thought it best to steer clear of you.
I understand, Lizzie said. She swallowed hard. I guess, she said, struggling for lightness, that it wouldn't have worked between us anyway. I mean, we may have been following some sort of pattern laid down in the 16th century, but Queen Elizabeth I never had a thing going on with Amy's brother Arthur Robsart, did she? From what I've read of her, it sounds as though she spent the rest of her life alternatively pining for Robert Dudley and trying to make him jealous with other men, which sounds pretty ghastly to me, but hey, she had to do what she had to do.
We don't have to follow the 16th century pattern too closely,
Arthur said. The underlying thread of humour was back in his voice.
I don't think Robert Dudley did too well out of it either. He might have been loaded with money and titles, but he didn't get to marry Elizabeth, and his enemies used Amy's death as a stick to beat him with for the rest of his life. I came across a particularly cutting epitaph to him the other day.
He took a breath and quoted wryly,
"Here lies the constant husband, whose love was as firm as smoke."
Ouch, Lizzie said. That's harsh, but probably deserved. Silence fell. The peace of the high seemed to flow around them, soft and timeless. Perry, curled up at Lizzie's feet, twitched in a dog dream.
I hope you'll get on with Charlie and Lola,
Arthur said, looking at Perry.
My dogs,
he added, smiling at Lizzie.
I'm sure he will.
He stirred.
I want to finish this, Lizzie,
he said.
Once and for all. I want to be sure it's over.
You mean the recurring pattern of Amy's death? Lizzie said cautiously.
Not.
Arthur looked horrified. He reached across the table and took her hands in his.
No! God, no, sorry. No! Not us.
He smiled at her.
We've only just begun,
he said softly.
But I don't want us, or Johnny, or anyone else's life overshadowed by this again. We have to end it now.
Lizzie nodded. I've been thinking about this, she said. Now the truth is out that Anna killed Amelia. Amy Robsart's spirit may be appeased, and the curse broken. In every other instance, the truth was hushed up. Amy's death, and Amias Latimer, and Amethyst Green. She tightened her grip on Arthur's hands. And Jenna, she said. We don't know exactly what happened to all of them, she said, and probably we never will. The story was similar but different every time. But now, at least, the truth is free. She stood up, pulling Arthur to his feet too. I have an idea, she said. I need to talk to Avery, and I need a little time. She reached up and kissed him. Come back tomorrow, she said. Arthur put his arms about her, and joy swept through her, wrapping itself around her heart. It felt good.
I'll go,
he said, kissing her again.
But I will be back.
For a crazy, mixed-up girl you never wanted to get involved with, Lizzie said. Her eyes filled with tears.
Oh, Arthur. Hey.
Arthur brushed away her tears with the pad of his thumb.
We can do this.
Yes, Lizzie said. Her fragile heart was just starting to believe it. I'm used to being on my own, she cautioned.
I'm not good at relationships. It was always easier to manage by myself. I guess," she swallowed hard, "perhaps I never felt that lovable." "I'll show you that you are," Arthur promised. He rubbed his cheek against her hair. "Besides, you have Jules and Avery and Johnny as well as me." He nodded to the snoring dog. "And Perry, of course." Lizzie giggled. "It's nice having people and dogs you love in your life." "I'll take that as a declaration," Arthur said. "I love you too. But you know that." He gave her a wry smile. "You can read me like a book." "I can't promise to stop doing that," Lizzie said. "But I reckon you understand me pretty well too, psychic gift or no psychic gift. Just don't expect me to read the memory of stone if we visit any historical houses together," she added. "I'm done with all that. You can buy a guidebook, like everyone else."
Chapter 27. Lizzie, present day. It was a beautiful autumn day in the Cotswolds. The sky was the pale, translucent blue of a winter sea at dawn, and the sun hung low over the horizon. The fallen beech leaves crunched beneath their feet as Lizzie and Arthur walked along the footpath to the citrine pool. There was the slightest hint of frost in the air. "I expected the water to have a yellow tinge to it with a name like that," Arthur said as they stood on the edge of the pool. "But it's dark." "According to legend," Lizzie said, "the waters turned black when they trapped Amy Robsart's wandering spirit and confined it to the pool. Before that, it had been a greenish-yellow colour because of the rare quartz in the rock." "I expect there's a biological explanation for the change in water coloration," Arthur said. "But it's a good story." He looked at her. "So this was where it happened. This was where the priests of Oxford locked Amy up for perpetuity." "Yes." Lizzie shivered as a breath of air blew little eddies across the pond. "This is where they captured her and tried to bind her soul, and once she was trapped, the pattern kept on repeating." She touched Arthur's arm gently. "The pattern is broken now, but to finish this we need to set Amy's spirit free. So many wrongs have been done to her in life and the afterlife. We're closing the circle, showing her that it is over." Arthur looked around. The willows bent low over the edge of the pool and trailed their bare branches in the water. "It's probably just my imagination," he said. "But I don't like it here. There's a bad feeling in the air." "Yes," Lizzie said. She'd felt it from the moment she had seen the dark water glittering in the low sun. "I almost expect to see a flash of lightning and an apparition from a horror film," Arthur said. He dug his hands deep into the pockets of his coat and hunched his shoulders. "Poor Amy," he said. "What a horrible fate." Lizzie put down the cardboard box she had been carrying and lifted the lid. Inside was a wreath of leaves and flowers that she had created that morning with Avery's help. "It's Quercus robur," she said in answer to Arthur's quizzical look. "The English oak. It's strong and beautiful." She touched the petals of the pink flowers she had laid on top of the entwined oak stems and dark green leaves. "These are carnations," she said. "They're the descendants of the pinks and clove gillyflowers that people grew in Tudor times. They were the symbol of undying love." "I recognise them from Amy Robsart's wedding portrait," Arthur said. "She was wearing a brooch with oak leaves and gillyflowers." "Yes," Lizzie said. "It's a symbol from a time when Amy had both great love and great hope in her life," she said.
I wanted her to know that she is not forgotten and that hope can rise again. Lizzie held the wreath in her hand for a moment, and then she took a step back and threw it overarm into the deep water. She heard the splash and saw the ripples spread and then fade. "Nice throw," Arthur said. "I was in the school netball team," Lizzie said. She put her hand in his, and they stood side by side. She watched the garland settle on the water. She felt the spiral of love and grief rise up from the waters then, felt it flare into life and die down until it was washed away and the shaft of sunlight cut through the overhanging willows and danced across the surface of the pond, reflecting shades of green and gold and citrine onto the oaken and gillyflower wreath. "I think," she said, "that the best way to break the destructive patterns of the past, of any past, is to write a different future. We can do that now." Epilogue. Amy Robsart, The Citrine Pool. From the other side of the pool, I watched them, Elizabeth and Arthur, joined now through time and destiny. This is a different Elizabeth from the one I had known. She is as brave as the first Elizabeth, but she is kinder and more generous. She has changed, and in doing so, she has altered the course of fate and the futures of those who are to come. Elizabeth, my enemy, you were the only one who could help me. You saw that the truth needed to be told. You broke the pattern. Yet, in the end, it is your kindness that heals me. Kindness cannot alter the past, but it can change the future. It can bring peace. I watch with them as the sun falls, brilliant and bright, on the oak and gillyflower wreath, and the waters of the pool dazzle in shades of green and gold. I feel my spirit expand as it touches freedom. They turn to leave. His arm is about her head against his shoulder. They love. They will always love. This I know. My time is done now. I can leave too, slip away, and be gone, with love and hope in my heart. I am no longer trapped. I can go where I will and be free. It is a beautiful day.
We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of The Forgotten Sister by Nicola Cornick, presented by Graydon House and Harper Audio. Executive Producer Jennifer Lopes. Text copyright 2020 by Nicola Cornick. Production copyright 2020 by HarperCollins Publishers Limited. All rights reserved. Thank you for listening.